Say to yourself, I am more than my physical body. Because I am more than physical matter, I can perceive that which is greater than the physical world. I deeply desire to expand, to experience, to know, to understand, to control, to use such greater energies and energy systems as may be beneficial and constructive to me and to those who follow me. I deeply desire the help and cooperation, the assistance, the understanding of those individuals whose wisdom, development, and experience are equal to or greater than my own. I ask their guidance and protection from any influence or any source that might provide me with less than my stated desires.
I do not know all the answers to the questions about reality. I do not claim to know the ultimate truth about life. I seek that which has been made hidden as a part of a family of explorers of consciousness. I am the void one.
Welcome to Lighting the Void.
Oh, broadcasting live from a shack on a hill in the mossy creek bottoms of King Creek, Arkansas. This is Lighting the Void live here on the Fringe FM. It's an unusual Monday, Moonday night, but I figured I needed to give everybody an update. Are y'all ready for this? We've been doing the tarot reading summer sale, and we're going to keep this thing going for reasons that, necessities. But here's one necessity that's happened. Check this out. Let me see if y'all can hear this thing. I'm not turning it off either. Did y'all hear that? That is my loud voice, but that is also an 8,000 BTU LG AC. Thanks to all of you. And I've been sleeping like a baby. Almost, it's hard to stay awake. Almost. What's up, Sir Wolf? Domek? Honey? Barefoot, I mean. It's been hard to stay awake because I've been so damn comfy, catching up on the sleep. But been doing a lot of readings too, man. And it's just been a complete, blessing. Right? Like, a blessing. So, to meet everybody. And I've gotten to the point where I've set up a Calendly link so people can just schedule them, and it reminds me and it reminds you, and my ADHD doesn't take over. And you could still get those readings at 70% off right now. We're doing the summer sale, so they're only $30. So a $30 purchase at the Patreon or a $30 donation. I'll send you the Calendly link, and we'll do a full Golden Dawn kind of spread for you, and then you'll get a whole hour with me. It's fun, man. It does raise your energy to do readings. When I do readings with people, I don't know if it's the readings or just meeting. Like, everybody that I've met and done readings with it's been so cool, man. It's hard to explain, actually. It's like talking to family. And I'm not just saying that. Like, It's like talking to family and then talking about deep stuff. And some of these people I haven't even, it's like I've met for the first time and I'm still, or it could just be the tarot. I don't want to think it's the tarot though. I'm too sentimental. I think it's us, you know. What's up, Jane? What's up, Chris? Yeah, see, Chris got a reading. I think Jane did too, Barefoot, Domek. So, but look at these. I've had these cards, man, forever. Look at the sides of these some bitches. I've cleaned them like 9 times. I think it's time for a new deck. Like I said, I'm sentimental, right? So that is not white. Look at that. These things are years old. I can't believe I can't believe I've had this deck so long, man. I feel like I'm just energetically tied to it. So to go buy another one, you know, what's up, Bryce? I'd be doing a disservice to everybody, you know, especially me. I want to get back into the tree, but I realize that talking about the tree has been somewhat of a, like speaking I'm not going to say who told me this, but it's like speaking a different language. But it really is speaking a different language, kind of. It's the language of the Western esoteric system. It's like the system of grammar for it, or the system of understanding God, or manifestation, or how our consciousness relates to manifestation or creation. And we have these 10 spheres, and in these 10 spheres, things come into manifestation, and we also are, it's like a feedback loop. So things come into manifestation to the earth, and from the earth, we feed back this I amness to the creator. And I got to thinking about that. They have a homework assignment for everybody if you feel like doing it. You definitely should, though. So you should go to church with me on Sundays. Liam Thomas Christopher does a video every Sunday. And this week's video he did was so good, man. It was about imagination. I mean, that's not the title of the video. The title of the video is if I take a break from magic, what's it going to be like? And anytime I've taken a break from magic, like just when I've stopped doing it, it's been kind of brutal for me. And the reason why that he goes into it, he really explains it. And I'd rather you go watch the video so you could see it for yourself. But I can't find my tree, man, to put on the thing. You guys are listening on the radio, you just have to imagine the tree, I guess, because I can't find the damn thing. So I could show the picture of it. But the imagination is not what we think it is. We think our imagination is like just made up stuff, right? So for the longest time, we tell people, especially on this channel, and he got me thinking, is like, we've been telling people, don't let the world define you. Don't let the mirror. So if you look at life like a movie screen, or like a projection or a movie screen, and I'm not saying be unrealistic, but it is. It's a movie screen with natural laws. And in this movie screen, it's constantly projecting and manifesting the story that you tell it all the time. That's what it does. And so this I amness at the top of the tree needs this feedback loop. It's like reaching down to you here in the earth. It's manifesting itself in the earth, but also reaching down to get this feedback loop of what's going on. And every time we lose that, we say, well, I'm not going to let the world define me anymore. I'm going to define the world from the inside out, which is good. That's a start. But really, the whole play is like this bridegroom play of the back and forth. That's the most important thing. So when we lose that part of us, we suffer. When we lose that part of us that's tapped into this like imaginative place where we're creating with this source, whatever we want to call it, the grand architect, the demiurge, if you want to scare yourself, whatever you want to call it. So you're creating with it, you're feeding back to it, and this constant loop needs to keep happening, and you have to fall in love with this process, right? So when magicians take a break from magic, they've been making their whole world about this feedback loop. Every day they do ceremony and ritual, and they make sure that they're conversating almost with this partner, the spiritual partner, the creator, God, whatever you want to call it. And using the imagination that we think is fake, which is probably more real than any part of us that we think is real. And then we take a break, we stop doing it, or something in life gets to us and we just stop doing it, or we escape, or we run away, or we try to force something to happen or whatever, and we stop having, I want to say even it's like we stop having fun with it. Now, I'm not trying to quote Liam the way he explained it because it's a much longer video, but it opened my eyes to a lot of things. So like when I do this tarot reading, right, I trust the cards. The reason why I trust the cards is because I've been doing it so long as a form of symbolic communication with that back and forth place. Yes, it's fun. Yes, it's like this. It's almost like this place where a kid goes to play with his toys, but not to just have fun, to communicate with the creator. You know, when kids, they have like the imaginary friend that they talk to and they don't have a friend and you think they're crazy or cute or whatever. But really, you should be doing that with the creator all the time. So you should be telling the world who you are, and then the world gives you feedback, and then you do it again, and the world gives you feedback, and you do it again and again and again. And it's not really falling in love. Like this was a big like awakening for me listening to him talk about this. So it's not really falling in love with the idea that, okay, I'm going to create my reality and express myself into the world, which is, again, to me, is way better than letting the world define you. But it's more of a falling in love with that back and forth process, right? The adventure of that back and forth process. So when we look at the tree of life gives us a system of spheres or grammar to kind of identify what's going on within us and inside that back and forth process. Also, the energy that's in our aura, and it just helps us identify the process, these 10 spheres. So you have this, the top sphere of Kether, which is pretty much the whirling force, the first whirling forces of the creator, like, or the Big Bang. And then you have at the bottom Malkuth. Now we went through all the spheres except for 2, right? So we're in Yesod and Malkuth. And what we've learned throughout this book is that there's 3 pillars. There's the pillar of mercy, which is more like the positive and masculine side pillar. It's got 3 spheres on it. There's the pillar of severity, which is more of like the negative, not bad negative, but just the circuit force negative energy, and the feminine energy. And these, what we've learned in Dion Fortune's book is that these are currents that are happening in our life. And that middle pillar is that conscious exploration and between that back and forth between us and creator. So as we go up and down the middle pillar, and these forces are changing and rotating, and we're working out karmas or trying to manifest stuff or whatever the hell we're doing, that middle pillar is really what's going on inside of us on a bigger level most of the time. So, and I've thought about this stuff too as doing like readings for people, you know. It makes a lot of sense when I'm doing these readings and seeing the things that people are going through. Because the tarot is not like, the tarot isn't like, you know, those, what do you call it, oracle cards, where it's always like beautiful and positive and things like that. It does have some cards, you know, you got to deal with stuff. But if you start, I'm just saying, is if you start looking at this whole thing as an adventure, and if you start looking at this play, what you're doing with the imagination, think about the power of belief, how powerful it is. People take it into the astral realm. This is why, like, when Robert Monroe and William Billman, they go into the astral realm and they're seeing all these different things, and people have all these different beliefs and all these different fears and all these different addictions, and every single one of them are taking their beliefs, addictions, fears, loves, religion, whatever it is, into the astral realm with them. The power of belief goes right along with the power of our imagination, which directly affects our reality moment by moment by moment, which is that I am force. So we're really never stuck. Not really. We just kind of choose to be, or we So I want to get into Yesod, which is the generative force. So if you want to relate that to the universe, it's going to be more like the unconscious, the astral realm, the moon, things like that. If you want to relate it to the body, if you're going down the middle pillar of the body, it's the generative forces in the body, you know. And I got to find I'll find a glyph when we go to break, but it's the pillar right above Malkuth before the tree starts coming into formation. And it's called Yesod, the foundation. And the Hebrew spelling is Yod Samek Vav Dalet. The magical image is a beautiful naked man, very strong. Remember, it's the generative forces. The situation on the tree is towards the base of the pillar of equilibrium, or the middle pillar. And in the Yetziradic text, it is the ninth path, which is called the pure intelligence, because it purifies the emanations. It proves and corrects the designing of their representations and disposes the unity with which they are designed without diminution or division. I call it like the place of the blueprints, really. Right before something manifests physically, it's in Yesod, in the foundation. Like before you see a physical house, you'll see the, blueprints to it. The God name is Shaddai El Kai, or the Almighty Living God, and the archangel that governs this sphere is Gabriel. The order of the angels that reside here are the cherubim, or the strong, and the mundane chakra is Lavana, or the moon. The spiritual experience that you're going to have here is the vision of the machinery of the universe, and its virtue is independence, and its vice is idleness, which means you're not doing shit. That's what this vice is, right? So its correspondence in the microcosm in your body is the reproductive organs, and the symbols are the perfumes and the sandals. So the moon kind of goes along with the reproductive organs too, right? Because you got the 28-day cycle kind of thing. The tarot cards that correspond with the Yesod are the 4 nines. The 9 of Wands, which means great strength. The 9 of Cups, which means material happiness. The 9 of Swords, which is despair and cruelty. And the 9 of Pentacles, which is material gain. The color of this sphere in Atziluth, in the red world and the fire world, or the fire tree, is indigo. In the world of Bria, it's violet, the blue world. If y'all have watched my other video. In the world of Yetzirah, it's very dark purple. And in the world of Asaya, it's citrine flecked with azure. I don't know why she just doesn't say blue. I guess she likes to say azure. Chris, what's up, Chris? I'll send you that email too, man. I haven't forgot. It says, we suffer the more we fall out of practice, because the more we experience and participate in that cosmic conversation, we are denying our divine aspects. And yeah, man, the cosmic conversation, I like that. Pretty much what it is, right? So the study of the symbolism of Yesod reveals two apparently, incongruous sets of symbols. Upon the one hand, we have the conception of Yesod as the foundation of the universe, established in strength, and this is indicated by the recurrence of the idea of strength, as in the magical image of a beautiful naked man, very strong, which the God name of Shaddai, or Almighty, the cherubim, the strong angels, and the 9 of Wands, whose secret name is the Lord of great strength. But upon the other hand, we have the moon symbolism, which is very fluidic, a continual state of flux and reflux, under the presidency of Gabriel, the archangel of the element of water. So how are we to reconcile these conflicting concepts? The answer is to be found in the words of the Yetziradic text, which says of the ninth path that it purifies the emanations. So remember, as the creative force comes down the tree, it emanates all the way down the tree. So when it gets to Yesod, or the foundation, this is where it starts to purify itself. It proves and corrects the designing of their representations and disposes of the unity with which they are designed without diminution or division. And this concept is further illuminated by the nature of the spiritual experience assigned to Yesod, which is described as the vision of the machinery of the universe. So we get the concept then of the fluidic waters of chaos being finally gathered up and organized by means of the representations that we designed in Hod. So the things that we came up with in our mind in the mental world in Hod. And this final proving or correcting and disposing of the unity of these representations or formative images, resulting in the organization of the machinery of the universe, or the vision of which constitutes the spiritual experience of the Sephirah. In fact, Yesod might aptly be described as the sphere of the machinery of the universe, if we just want to call it that. And if we liken the kingdom to earth to a great ship, then Yesod would be the engine room. It's the motor, man. So Yesod is the sphere of that peculiar substance partaking of the nature of both mind and matter, which is called the, the ether of the wise, or the akasha, or the astral light, according to the terminology that is being used. It is not the same as the ether of the physicists, which is the fire element of the sphere of Malkuth, but is to that ether what that ether is to dense matter. Yeah, and a lot of times when we talk about out-of-body experiences, when I say we're having like an etheric projection, or we're really, really close to Earth, or we're in Earth in our etheric body when we come out of our body, I think, in my opinion, we're in the sphere of Yesod, if you want to look at it esoterically. Because we're not actually in our physical body, so we're not in Malkuth, even though we see the world. We're in our etheric body, so we're kind of floating around in Yesod, you know. So this is, in fact, the basis of the phenomena which the physicist attributes to his empirical ether. The ether of the wise might, in fact, be called the root of the ether of physics. The material universe is an insoluble riddle to the materialist because he insists on trying to explain it in terms of its own plane. This is kind of the problem with science, too. They can't see past their own measuring tools and their senses. This is a thing that can never be done in any sphere of thought. Nothing can ever be explained in terms of itself, but only by being resumed in a greater whole. The four elements of the ancients find their explanation in a fifth, called the ether, as initiates have always maintained. For it is a doctrine of esoteric philosophy that any four visible states always have their root in a fifth, an invisible state. For instance, the four worlds of the Kabbalists have their roots behind the veils of the unmanifest. It is only by positioning this unmanifest fifth and assigning it to certain attributes deduced from the manifest four as being essential in the prime cause that we are able to arrive at any understanding of the nature of the four. Just like a pentacle, you got the four elements in a pentacle, but it doesn't come together until you have the fifth, right? So, do we find in Yesod the unmanifest fifth of the four elements of Malkuth, the fire of the ancients answering to the ether of the moderns, and earth, water, and air to the solid, liquid, and gaseous states of matter? Yesod then must be conceived of as the receptacle of the emanations of all the other Sephirah, as it is taught by the Kabbalists, and as the immediate and only transmitter of these emanations to Malkuth, the physical plane. As the Yetziratic text says, it is the function of Yesod to purify the emanations and to prove and correct them. Consequently, it is in the sphere of Yesod that all operations are carried out which are designed for the correcting of the sphere of dense matter, or in any way to dispose of its unity of design. Yesod, then, is the all-important sphere for any magic which is designed to take effect in the physical world. And this is why moon magic is so damn important. All right? This is why so many magicians, in my opinion, they have this pull to trigger magical things with the waning and waxing of the moon, or just using the moon. Now, I know to a rationalist, the moon is like, there's nothing magical about it. It's just a shadow or whatever. Well, that's cool. You can look at it that way. For sure, scientifically, that's what it definitely is. But in philosophy and magic, in that imaginative world of that play back and forth between us and Creator, that moon is a mystic thing that triggers magical things to come into manifestation. It's the place where we send messages up the tree or to God or whatever. And it's also the place that triggers things down into the earth. And frankly, I can't stop looking at the damn thing. The latest moon that we had was beautiful. It just gives off like a magical vibe, for sure. All right, so did I read that? Yeah. So now be it well noted that all the spheres operate according to their nature, and that nature cannot in any way be altered by any magical or miraculous influence, however powerful. We can only correct the designing of the representations, so the things represented remain constant. The conditions of the material world cannot therefore be arbitrarily disposed of, even if by the highest spiritual force, as is believed by those who pray to God to intervene on their behalf, healing their diseases or giving rain upon the earth. Neither can they any more be influenced by the most powerful wizard with his spells. The only approach to Malkuth is through Yesod. Okay, and the approach to Yesod is through Hod, where the representations are designed. Remember, Hod is the sphere of the mind, pretty much, or the sphere of the intellect and messages and knowledge and stuff. So let us, once and for all, disabuse our minds of the idea that spirit can work directly upon matter. It never does so. Spirit works through the mind, and mind works through the ether, and the ether, which is the framework of matter, and the vehicle of the life forces, can be manipulated within the limits of its nature, which are by no means inconsiderable. All miraculous and supernatural happenings, therefore, are brought about by the manipulation of the natural qualities of the ether. And if we understood the nature of the ether, we should understand that the rationale of their production. We should no longer attribute them to direct interventions of God or to the activities of the spirits of the departed. Then we attribute nowadays the phenomena of combustion to the activities of phlogiston, which a previous generation believed to be the active principle of fire. I didn't know that, but what is that? Phlogiston, whose presence or absence determined whether a given substance would burn or not. So basically what she's saying is all these miracles that we think are miracles from God and all this stuff. I mean, you could look at it that way for sure, but what's really happening is it's coming down the tree at the top of the tree, or the mind, if you want to correlate it to the body. You have a spark. It comes down the tree. It goes through the other spheres. It starts to formulate itself. And it goes into the generative forces and purifies itself in the body. But it's like mind, heart, ether, I guess you could say. Mind, heart, ether, if you want to go down the middle pillar. The all mind, or the I amness, down to the heart, into the ether, and then into the physical world. And if you really kind of think about it, like when you study like Joe Dispenza's work, I don't know if any of you guys follow Joe Dispenza, but this guy's got some fascinating case subjects where people are healing themselves and changing their cellular structures and healing all kinds of stuff, you know. And it seems miraculous, right? It seems like it's a miracle or it's magic. But the only reason why we call these things miracles or magic is because we don't understand how it technically works. We now understand, if this book is correct, right, how it philosophically works. That the process of what we call divination or divine things or miracles simply happens in a process, and the tree shows us this process. Mind, heart, generation, matter, you know, or mind, heart, ether, matter. And I don't mean like the intellect, like Hod, but you know, the first time you have a thought. Think about it, right? Like when you act upon something, you do this in a microcosmic way. You have a thought. Don't know where it come from, but you had it. You can act upon it emotionally, or you don't have to, but you can. So now you have this thought, this spark, and this emotion. And what moves you forward, what gives you that generative force, is actually the energies and the fires in your body. The sexual energies in your body, they move you around all day. Doesn't have anything to do with sex. It's just the way energy works. And then when it actually happens, or when you get it done, or when you accomplish it, that's like earth. That's manifest. So it really isn't all that magical if you think about it, right? But then it kind of is. That's a whole other rabbit hole, though. There are men living today who learned about this in their school days and have seen the change of thought come about equally. The day will come when men will look upon psychic phenomena and spiritual healing as we look upon this, I guess, phlogiston, is that what it's called? This process of whether fire burns hot or not. So at the present state of our knowledge, it is not possible to give a very full account of the nature of the Yesodic ether. We can, however, state certain things about it that have been learned by experience. Much has been learned by experiments with ectoplasm, which is very close akin to it in nature. In fact, one might describe it as organic ether, in contradistinction to the ether of physics, which is inorganic ether. We know that ectoplasm takes on forms and holds them and relinquishes them with equal readiness, showing that it's not the form which confines the life, but the life that determines the form. We likewise know that ectoplasm can be emanated and absorbed, though we do not know the conditions that govern this phenomena. Ectoplasm. That reminds me of Ghostbusters, right? Ectoplasm is, in fact, a kind of ethereal protoplasm, and we might conceive of this as, or call it the astral light, as bearing the same relationship to ectoplasm as, or ectoplasm as ectoplasm bears to protoplasm. I don't know about all that. That's above my head there. Didn't the Ghostbusters talk about ectoplasm a lot? I think they did, didn't they? So does Blavatsky too. So although we know more now, or although we know the ultimate nature of the astral ether, then we understand the ultimate nature of electricity. Nevertheless, we know by observation that it possesses certain properties. We do not merely deduce these properties, we know they exist by experience, because they enable us to manipulate the subtle substance in certain definite ways, within, as already been explained, the limits of its own nature. Two of these properties are all important to the work of the practical occultist, forming, in fact, the basis of his whole system. The first of these properties is the capacity of the astral ether to be molded into forms by the mind. The second is the capacity of the astral ether to hold the molecules of dense matter in its mesh-likeness of tension as in a rack of pigeonholes. It may be asked, how do we know that the other possesses these qualities, so vital to our magical hypothesis? Well, we answer that the existence of these properties is the only explanation of the properties of the living matter and conscious mind. Basically, we know this works by our experience. Lots of people have had etheric out-of-body experiences. Lots of people have manifested stuff or seen I guess you could say ectoplasm. I've seen it a couple times that I thought was a ghost or some kind of figure or whatever. So we cannot explain either mind or matter in terms of themselves alone, and we cannot explain mind without employing terms of sensation, and we cannot explain living matter without employing terms of consciousness. Sensation must always be an affair of both mind and matter, inexplicable in isolation. To explain neural sensation, we must posit a substance that is intermediate between mind and matter. To understand purposive movement, we equally require the existence of such a substance, that is, which possesses the power to receive and hold the impress of thought and to influence the position in space of the atomic units of whatever. I mean, we can see this in the observation effect too, you know. There has to be something there that's doing that. These are the properties we assign to our hypothetical astral ether, advancing the same arguments in justification, and this proceeding as have been accepted on behalf of a similar proceeding in the case of the ether of physics. We plead for our hypothesis, and if the arguments in favor of either of physics are acceptable, it is difficult to see why an ether should not be permitted to psychology. Well, I think you're wasting your time, Dion, trying to talk about ether and ectoplasm and trying to put it in mainstream education, like especially back then. You're wasting your time. I mean, just talk about faith a little bit. How about that? So it's an old maxim that hypothesis should not be unnecessarily multiplied, but when a hypothesis such as that of ether has proved so fruitful, we are surely amply justified in experimenting with a similar one in the sister science of psychology. One thing is quite certain. Psychology never made any real progress while it was limited itself to the materialistic viewpoint and regarded consciousness as an epiphenomenon, that is to say, an irrelevant and purposeless byproduct of physiological activity, if anything in nature can be called irrelevant and purposeless. Well, it's not purposeless now. And we have whole institutes. I think she would be happy now, because psychology isn't purposeless now. We have whole institutes dedicated to studying the astral and ether realms now. We've got people like Dr. Joe Dispenza, Dean Radin, all kinds of people that are studying these things and showing us that it works. So, I mean, it's not in the mainstream yet. It's still pretty fringe, but we're getting there. So let us learn a lesson from coal tar, the irrelevant and purposeless byproduct of the production of gas to be practically given away to anyone who wanted to tar a fence, and subsequently found to be the source of the most valuable chemicals or dyestuffs and drugs. So from the point of view of magic, Yesod is the all-important Sephirah, just as Tifereth is the functional sphere of mysticism with its transcendent contacts with the supernal. If the tree of life be considered as a whole, it will be seen clearly that it works in triads. The three supernals having their correlatives on a lower arc in Chesed, Gabor, and Tifereth. And anyone who has had experience of practical Kabbalism knows that for all practical purposes, Tifereth is Kether for us while we tabernacle in this house of flesh. For no man may look upon the face of God and live. We can only see the Father reflected in the Son, and Tifereth shows us the Father. So, Netzach, Hod, and Yesod from the lower triad, overshadowed by Tifereth as the lower self is overshadowed by the higher self, one might in fact say that the four lower Sephiroth form the personality, or unit of incarnation of the tree, the higher triad of Chesed, Gabor, and Tifereth from the individuality, or higher self, and the three supernals correspond to the divine spark. It will be observed that although each Sephirah is considered to emanate its successor, the triads are always represented, when once emanated in equilibrium, as a pair of opposites manifesting in a functional third. In this, the lower triad, then we find Netzach and Hod equilibrated in Yesod, which is conceived as receiving their emanations. I'll show you all a picture of this after the break so you'll understand what she's saying. But it's also received the emanations of Tifereth and through Tifereth of Kether, because there's always a line of force working down a pillar. Consequently, as it's received also from Netzach and Hod, the influences that they in turn have received from their receptive pillars. So it might aptly be called in the worlds of the Kabbalists the receptacle of the emanations, and it is from Yesod that Malkuth receives the influx of the divine forces. It's almost like I don't know why I'm thinking of this. It's probably a bad analogy, but it's almost like a paint sprayer, you know? You got all these forces coming together. I think it's because I used to paint houses. And then it all kind of comes to the gun with the perfect pressure, and has its perfect air and all this other stuff, kind of like engine has perfect, gas and air and all this other stuff to get the perfect, like, fuel. So before you get that perfect emanation to manifest something physically, you have to have something there to filter it and make it perfect, right? Which is Yesod, or the moon. Yesod also is the supreme importance to the practical occultist, because it is the first sphere which he makes acquaintance when he commences to rise on the plains and lifts consciousness above Malkuth. And having trodden the terrible 30-second path of Tav, or cross of suffering, and of Saturn, he enters Yesod, the treasure house of images, the sphere of Maya, or illusion, which is what I was talking about earlier, the imagination, right? Yesod, considered by itself, is unquestionably the sphere of illusion, because the treasure house of images is none other than the reflecting ether of the earth sphere, and corresponds in the microcosm to the unconscious of the psychologist, filled with the ancient and forgotten things, repressed since the childhood of the race. And to me, you know what, like, that's also, I mean, it is kind of the sphere of imagination and the unconscious, but to me, it's also why when people astral travel, things are so damn chaotic in that realm. Because imagine you just going into this place where the collective unconscious exists. I mean, you have your own little place when you come out of body or whatever, or you dream. You have your own little world. But if you start going up a little higher or a little denser, I don't want to say higher because I don't really know if it's higher, whatever. But as you start going into this conscious realm where the collective unconscious exists and everything is mingled together, shit can get crazy, man. We're talking about billions and billions of people's unconscious stuff just in this one realm. You're liable to run into anything in that place. The keys that unlock the doors of the treasure house of images enables us to command its denizens are to be found in Hod, the sphere of magic. It is truly said in the mysteries that no degree becomes functional until one is taken the next, and anyone who tries to function as a magician in Yesod soon learns his error, for although he can perceive the images in the treasure house, he has no word of power with which to command them. Therefore, an initiation upon the western path, at any rate, I cannot answer for the eastern, not knowing it, but the grades of the lesser mysteries go straight up the central pillar to Tifereth, and do not follow the lines of the lightning flash. In Tifereth, the initiate takes the first grade of adepthood, and from then returns. If he so desires to learn the technique of the magician relative to the personality of the tree, that is to say, the macrocosmic unit of incarnation. If he does not desire this, but wishes to become free from the wheel of birth and death, he proceeds up the central pillar, which is also called by the Kabbalists the path of the arrow, and passes over the abyss into Kether, and then enters this light that cometh forth not again. Yesod is also the sphere of the moon. Therefore, to understand its significance, we must know something about the way in which the moon is regarded in occultism. It is held by initiates that the moon separated from the earth at the period when evolution was on the cusp between the etheric phase of its development and the phase of dense matter. Those who are familiar with the terminology of astrology will know that the cusp is that phase between two signs where the influence of both is intermingled. The moon then has something of the material in its composition, hence the luminous globe we see in the sky. But the really important part of its composition is etheric, because it was during the phase of evolution when life was developing the etheric form that the moon had its heyday. And for this reason, the phase is called by some occultists the Luna phase of evolution. And those who want to know more of the subject will find it dealt with in the Rosicrucian Cosmo Conception by Max Heindel and The Secret Doctrine by Madame Blavatsky. As the Kabbalists use a different system of classifications to the Vedantists, we cannot open up the vast subject of the rays and the rounds in these pages. It must suffice to give dogmatically certain facts known to occultists and indicate where the reader can find further information if he desires it. Well, thanks, Dion, for that tip. The moon and the earth, according to occult theories, share one etheric double through their two physical bodies, or although their two physical bodies are separate. And the moon is the senior partner, that is to say, in etheric matters. The moon is the positive pole of the battery, and the earth the negative one. Yesod, as we have already seen, reflects the sun of Tifereth, which in its turn is Kether on a lower arc. Astronomers have long told us that the moon shines by borrowed light, reflected from the sun, and they are now beginning to hint that the sun may receive its fiery energy from outer space. So, translated into Kabbalistic terminology, outer space would be the great unmanifest, and the Kabbalists have taught this doctrine since the days when Enoch walked with God and was not, for God had taken him, in other words, he had received the initiation of Kether. I'm sitting here reading about this freaking sphere, and I don't even know if you guys know where it's actually located on the tree, because I can't find my picture of the damn tree. So before we jump into Malkuth, I want to stop right here, take a short break, and then so I can find that picture. I think most of you know where it is, though. But I have another book I want you guys to, if you get time to read. It's called A Garden of Pomegranates. And so once you learn about Yesod and this sphere, like this lunar sphere of Yesod, you'll start realizing why we're so magically kind of connected with the moon and why all of us fringers love the moon. I know I do. Can't stop looking at the damn thing. All right, we'll be right back, and then I'll find that damn picture. Those of you listening on the radio station at the Fringe FM, thank you for listening. You guys are going to have to, I don't know, look at a picture of the Tree of Life while we're doing this, or, use your imagination.
Got you down. Do you not understand the difference between a wave or a particle? What about the planets? How do all those rotate around each other? Laws of physics and other sciences can be confusing. So the next time you're curious just how exactly E equals MC squared, hire a highly trained and qualified professional. That's right, it's Space Lawyers. Space lawyers are skilled in litigation with the laws of time, space, cosmic ghost pirates, and various other lawyerings. Each space lawyer has a PhD in space law from the Cosmic Hall of Space Justice, and they can get you out of just about any sticky situation. So stop bonking your head on things, or accidentally creating big bangs with your haphazard studies in quantum physics. Leave all of that to the highly trained professionals prepared to litigate these laws for you. Just call 1-800-SPACELAWYER.com for more info.
Space lawyer?
Space lawyers cannot be used in a regular court of law. They can only accept cash and no cosmic traveler checks nor Visa debit cards. Please wait up to 4 cosmic business days for our space lawyers to get back to you.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7 with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
What I know about courage, I learned from my adoptive mom. She said sometimes you just gotta hold on and know we'll get through this. Mom, we are so high up. Hold my hand.
No, you hold my hand.
Here we go.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org to find out more.
I learned patience from my adoptive dad. All he had to say was,
"Hey, you got this. Just breathe." Hey, we're pretty good.
yeah.
Might have to start a band.
I got it.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org to find out more. This message is brought to you by Adopt US Kids, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the Ad Council.
My mother was always very active and independent, and she was familiar with her neighborhood. But one day, she stopped at the stop sign for much longer than usual. She wasn't even really sure where she was at.
It's important for you to talk to someone about it. I felt so much better after my son told me, "Mom, we'll figure it out."
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk.
Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more.
Have you ever wondered, what do the stars say for me? Or, will the next month or the next year be more favorable? How about, are our two signs compatible? Each month, at the new moon, you can ask these questions live with me, your astrologer psychic, Mary DeCina, along with host of Lighting the Void, Joe Root. Join us at the new moon for Cosmic Conditions. We look forward to working with your energy.
Every new moon at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, right here on Fringe. Got time to go over this. All right. So this is the whole tree. We've already went through all the Sephirah. We're at the last two. So if we're going to talk about the one that we're talking about tonight is that purple one. I'm trying to see if I can move it so you guys can, the purple one next to the last one at the bottom without covering up my head here. See it where it says foundation and Yesod? That's the one we're talking about. So let's get down to it. Oh, also, if you're really into this stuff, like Hermetic Kabbalah, and as it pertains to magic and Hermetics and stuff like that, and path workings, like this book, A Garden of Pomegranates by Israel Regardie is another one to get. It's a really good book. Okay, let's get back into this magic school stuff you want. So it will be seen from the above that Yesod, or the moon, is ever in a state of flux and reflux because the amount of sunlight received and reflected waxes and wanes in a 28-day cycle. Okay, this sound check. Malkuth, or Earth, is also in a state of flux and reflux in a 24-hour cycle, and for the same reason. So likewise, Malkuth, or Earth, has a 365-day cycle of which the phases are marked by the equinoxes and the solstices. It is the interacting sets of these tides which is all important to the practical occultist because so much of his work depends upon them. The charts of these tides have always been kept secret, and some of them are exceedingly complex. As these concern the secret workings, the genuine and legitimate occult secrets, which are only given after initiation, they cannot be dealt with in these pages. Enough has been said, however, to indicate that certain tides in the moon or the lunar sphere exist, or the ether exist and are important, and the students of the occult are probably wasting their time if they try to operate without the necessary charts. In other words, she's not really hiding what she's saying, right? She's like, use planetary. We have apps for that now, Dion, so we know what hour we're in, what phase of the moon, and how it relates to the moon too. There's all kinds of apps for that. Lunar charts, or I forget the name of it, luminary, whatever. I'm sure you guys know what it is. These lunar tides play a very important part in the physiological process of both plants and animals, and especially in the germination and growth of plants and the reproduction of animals, as witness the 28-day lunar sexual cycle of the human female. The male also has a sexual cycle based on the solar year, but in the artificially lit and heated houses of civilization, this cycle is not so marked. Though the poet drew our attention to the fact that in the spring a young man's fancy lightly turns to thoughts of love, and references has been found so apt that it is almost too hackneyed for quotation. That is true. I don't know about you fellas, but in the springtime, I'm feeling kind of frisky, so to speak. Not going to lie. I always thought it was because I was in Aries, though. So it is the light of the moon which is the stimulative factor in these etheric activities, and as Earth and Moon share one etheric double, all etheric activities are at their most active when the moon is at its full. Likewise, during the dark of the moon, etheric energy is at its lowest. and unorganized forces have a tendency to rise up and give trouble. The dragon of the Qliphoth raises his multiple heads during this time, so in consequence, practical occult work is best left alone during the dark by all but experienced workers. The life-giving forces are relatively weak and the unbalanced forces relatively strong. The result, in an inexperienced hands, if you don't know what you're doing, is chaos. Nature of Nisak and Hod, the magical image of Hod being a hermaphrodite, and Venus Aphrodite sometimes being represented among the ancients as bearded. So in Yesod again we meet with this dual symbolism, and yet again, as we shall see presently in Malkuth, this indicates clearly that in these Sephiroth belong to the lower levels of the tree, we must very definitely recognize a form and force side in each one. This comes out very clearly in both Yesod and Malkuth, to which both gods and goddesses have to be assigned. So Yesod would be what? Force, and Malkuth would be the form, right? If you're looking at it that way. Yesod is essentially the sphere of the moon, and as such comes under the presidency of Diana, the moon goddess of the Greeks. Now, Diana was primarily a chaste goddess, ever virgin, and when the overpresumptive Actaeon annoyed her, he was torn to pieces by his own hunting hounds. Diana, however, was represented at Ephesus as the many-breasted and regarded as a fertility goddess. Moreover, Isis is also a lunar goddess, as indicated by the lunar crescent upon her brow, which in Hathor becomes the cow horns, the cow being among all peoples the especial symbol of maternity. In the Kabbalistic system, or symbolism, the generative organs are assigned to Yesod. All this is very puzzling at first sight, for the symbol appears to be mutually exclusive. Carried a step further, however, we begin to find connecting links between the ideas. The moon has three goddesses assigned to her: Diana, Selene, or Luna, and Hecate, the latter being the goddess of witchcraft and enchantments, and also presiding over childbirth. There is also a very important moon god, none other than Thoth himself, lord of magic. So then, when we find Hecate in Greece and Thoth in Egypt, both assigned to the moon, we cannot fail to recognize the importance of the moon in matters of magic. What then is the key to the magical moon, who is sometimes a virgin goddess and sometimes a fertility goddess? Well, the answer is not very far to seek. It is to be found in the rhythmical nature of the moon, and in fact, the rhythmical nature of the sex life in the female. There are times when Diana is many-breasted. There are times when her hounds tear the intruder to pieces. In dealing with the rhythms of the moon, we are dealing with the etheric, not physical conditions. So the magnetism of living creatures wax and wanes with a definite tide. It is a thing that is not difficult to observe when one knows what to look for. It shows itself most clearly in relations between persons whom magnetism is fairly evenly balanced. Sometimes one will be in the ascendant, and sometimes the other. I think she's being polite about the feminine phases of the moon that happen, during these 28-day cycles. Sometimes she's raring to go, sometimes she's nurturing, and sometimes she's pissed. Now it may be asked, if the sphere of Yesod is etheric, why are the generative organs assigned to the sphere if it's etheric? For surely their function is physical, if anything, right? Well, the answer to that question is to be found in the knowledge of the subtler aspects of sex, which appear to be entirely lost to the Western world. Oh, you should see it now. It's even worse. It cannot be entered upon in detail in these pages, and must suffice to point out that all the more important aspects of sex are etheric and magnetic. We might liken it to an iceberg, 5/6 of whose bulk is below the surface. The actual physical reactions of sex form a very small proportion and by no means the most vital portion of its functioning. It is owing to our ignorance of this that so many marriages fail to fulfill the purpose of the wedding of the two halves into a perfect whole. We take no account of the magical side of marriage, despite the fact that the church classes it as a sacrament. Now, a sacrament is defined as an outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace, and it is that inward and spiritual grace which is so seldom found in the marriage act of the Anglo-Saxon races, with their relatively frigid temperament and contempt for the body. That inward and spiritual grace which makes of a marriage a true sacrament after its kind is not the grace of sublimation or renunciation, or a purity of denial and abstinence. It is the grace of the blessing of Pan and the joy and natural things, so beautifully expressed by Walt Whitman in his poem series, Children of Adam. The assignation to Yesod to the perfumes and the sandals is kind of very significant. These two things play a very important part in magical operations. The sandals, or soft heels or heelless slippers that give free play to the foot, are always used in ceremonial work to tread the magic circle. They are as important a part of the equipment of the practical occultist as his rod of power. God said unto Moses, Take off thy shoes from thy feet, for this place where you stand is holy ground. So the adept makes holy ground for himself by placing upon his feet the consecrated sandals. I always just take my shoes off. The Golden Dawn, they actually wear red slippers, though. The adept makes holy ground for himself by placing upon his feet the consecrated sandals, the floor cloth of the appropriate color and marked with the appropriate symbols, which is also an important piece of lodge furniture. It is designed to concentrate the earth magnetism used in the operation in the same way that the altar is the focus of the spiritual forces. Through our feet, we pick up the earth magnetism, and when that magnetism is of a special kind, we use special slippers that shall not inhibit it. Yeah, she's talking about the red slippers of the Golden Dawn right there. The perfumes, too, are very important in ceremonial operations, for they represent the etheric side of the affair. Their psychological influence is well known, but the fine art of using them psychologically has been but little studied outside occult lodges. The use of perfumes is the most effectual way of playing on the emotions, and consequently of changing the focus of consciousness. How quickly do our thoughts turn away from earthly things when the drift and smoke of incense comes to us from the high altar? How quickly do they return to them again when we get a whiff of patchouli from the next pew? And in the 4 tarot cards assigned to the Sephra now, how clearly do we see the workings of the etheric magnetism appearing? There is great strength when we are on the earth contacts and blessed of Pan. There is also material happiness. In fact, without the blessings of Pan, there can be no material happiness because there is no peace of the nerves. On its negative side, however, are to be found the depths of despair and cruelty. But with the earth contacts firm under our feet, there comes material gain because we are adequate to deal with the material plane. And that's the end of Yesod. Hopefully, if you're watching this, you got a better understanding of it. So let me just explain kind of what she was talking about earlier with the equilibration, right? If I can. So there's these things called the 3. Actually, I think I have a picture of this that explains it better, but there's the 3 triangles, right? So you got the top triangle, which is the supernals. So the mediation of these two is Kether, right? The equilibrium of these 2 spheres at the top, Chokma and Bina, is Kether. Just like the equilibrium of Chesed and Gabora is Tifereth, the yellow sphere. And the equilibrium of Hod and Netzach is Yesod, the purple sphere. And those represent the 3 like triangles, which is, I think it's called the supernal, ethical, and astral triangle. That's what some people call it. So we're going to get into Malkuth, like David Bowie says, from Kether to Malkuth, the kingdom. Again, there it is. Make it bigger. Let's make it bigger. There we go. Looks crazy though, don't it? All right. So the title of this sphere is Malkuth, the kingdom. The Hebrew spelling is Mem Lamed Kaf Vav Tav. A young woman crowned and throned is the magical image. The situation on the tree is at the base of the pillar of mildness, or the middle pillar, or of equilibrium. And the Yetziratic text, the 10th path, is called the resplendent intelligence because it is exalted above every head and sits upon the throne of Bina. It illuminates the splendors of all the lights and causes an influence to emanate from the Prince of Countenances, or the Angel of Kether. There's a ton of titles given to this sphere. It's called the Gate, or the Gate of Death, the Gate of the Shadow of Death, the Gate of Tears, the Gate of Justice, the Gate of Prayer, the Gate of the Daughter of the Mighty Ones, the Gate of the Garden of Eden, the Inferior Mother, Malka the Queen, Kaleb the Bride, or the Virgin. The God name for this sphere is Adonai Melech, or Adonai Ha-Aretz. So in the middle pillar, it's usually Adonai Ha-Aretz when you're doing that ritual. The archangel that governs this sphere is Sandalphon. And the choir of the angels that govern the sphere is the Ashim, or the souls of fire. The mundane chakra energy is the Sholem Ha-Yesadoth, or the sphere of the elements, the four elements. The spiritual experience that you have here is the vision of the holy guardian angel. Its virtue is discrimination, and its vices are avarice and inertia. It corresponds to the body and the microcosm, to the feet and the anus. So we're in the butthole of the sphere. I just look at it as the feet, whatever. Symbols are the altar of the double cube, the equal arm cross, the magic circle, and the triangle of art. The tarot cards that correspond here are the 4 tens. The 10 of wands, which is oppression. The 10 of cups, which is perfected success. The 10 of swords, which is ruin. And the 10 of pentacles, which is wealth. Its color in Atziluth, in the fire world, is yellow. And Bria is citron, olive, russet, and black. And Yetzirah, citron, olive, russet, and black, flecked with gold. And Asaya, black, rayed with yellow. I think this is the last chapter, so I'll try to get through it. So it will be observed that the conformation of the tree falls naturally into 3 functional triangles, but that Malkuth participates in none of the triangles, but stands apart, and is said by the Kabbalists that it receives the influences or emanations of all the other Sephiroth. But although Malkuth is the only Sephiroth that does not participate in a triangle, it is also the only Sephiroth that is represented as parti-colored instead of a unit, for it is divided into 4 quarters, which are assigned to the 4 elements of earth, air, fire, and water. And although it is not functional in any triangle, it represents the end results of all the activities of the tree. It is the nadir of evolution, the outermost point on the outgoing arc, through which all life must pass before returning whence it came. Malkuth is said to be the sphere of earth, but we must not make the mistake of thinking that the Kabbalists meant by Malkuth only the terrestrial sphere. They meant also the earth's soul, that is to say, the subtle, the psychic aspect of matter, the underlying nomenon of the physical plane, which gives rise to all physical phenomena, likewise with the 4 elements. These are not earth, air, fire, and water as known to the physicist, but are the 4 conditions in which energy can exist. The esotericist distinguishes these from their mundane counterparts by referring to them as the air of the wise, or the earth of the wise, as any case may be. That is to say, the element of air or of earth, as it is known to the initiate. The physicist recognizes the existence of matter in 3 states: a solid, wherein the particles of which it is composed adhere firmly to each other; a liquid, in which the particles move freely over each other; and gaseous, in which particles all try to get away or far away from each other as possible, or in other words, to diffuse. But these three modes of matter correspond to the three elements of earth, water, and air, and electrical phenomena corresponds to the element of fire. Esoteric science classifies all phenomena manifesting upon the physical plane under these four headings, as giving the best clue to the real understanding of their nature, and it recognizes that any given force can pass from one stage to another under certain conditions, such as water can exist in a state of ice and steam as well as its normal fluidity. The esotericist sees in Malkuth the end result of all the operations, not until the pairs of opposites have achieved the settled equilibrium which gives the state of earth or coherence can they be said to have completed in any given cycle of experience. When this is achieved, they build a permanent vehicle of manifestation and stereotype its reactions. The machinery of expression thus evolved becomes self-regulating and will continue to function within the minimum of attention, just as the human heart opens and shuts its valves with perfect regularity in response to stereotyped cycles of nervous impulses and the pressures of blood. So it becomes the perfect machine, the perfect balanced machine. She could have just said that. I don't know why she just doesn't do that. The great point to remember in connection with Malkuth is that herein is achieved stability. It is in the inertia of Malkuth that its virtue lies. All the other Sephirah are in varying degrees mobile, even the central pillar, only achieving equilibrium and function just as a tightrope walker achieves it. So like all the other Sephirah, though, Malkuth can only be understood when considered in relation to its neighbors. But in this case, there is only one neighbor, Yesod. No understanding of Malkuth can be arrived at save through an understanding of Yesod. For while Malkuth is essentially the sphere of all form, all coherence of parts, save simple mechanical stresses and electromagnetic attractions and repulsions, depend upon the functions of Yesod. And Yesod, though it is essentially a form-giving Sephirah, depends on the manifestations of its activities upon the substance provided by Malkuth. The forms of Yesod are such stuff as dreams are made of, till they have picked up the material particles of Malkuth to body forth their forms. So they are systems of stresses into whose framework the physical particles are built. And equally with Malkuth, it is an animate matter until the powers of Yesod ensoul it. We should conceive of the material plane as the outward and visible sign of the invisible etheric activity. Malkuth in its prime essence is only known to the instruments of the physicist. It goes without saying that where there is life, there is Yesod, because Yesod is the vehicle of life. But it should also be realized that where there is any kind of electrical activity or conductivity, whether of crystals, metals, or chemicals, there is Yesodic force in its function. It is this fact which makes certain substances suitable for use as talismans, because they will take a charge of astral force. It is not possible in these pages to go into a detailed study of esoteric physics. Enough must be said, however, to give the student an understanding of the principles underlying this concept of the material world, which sees it as visible drapery upon an invisible framework. The exact nature of the relationship between Yesod and Malkuth must be clearly understood because it's important for occult work. Yesod is, of course, the form-giving principle, and whatever form is built up in its sphere will be bodied forth in the sphere of Malkuth, unless it contains incompatibles, for it will tend to draw to itself the conditions of material expression. Material particles, however, are extremely resistant and unresponsive in their nature, and it is only by working upon the most tenuous aspect of matter, to which initiates give the name of the element of fire, that Yesodic forces can produce any effects. Once a response can be obtained from this element of fire, the other elements can in their turn be influenced. The element of fire, however, is a kind of overstate of matter with which only the most advanced physics have any acquaintance. It might best be called a state of relationship rather than a thing itself. The element of air might be described as a capacity to achieve these relationships, and such is the vital principle of physical life. For it is only in so far as matter has a capacity for organization that organic substance is possible. Elemental water, the water of the wise, is just plain protoplasm, and elemental earth is inorganic matter. Now, each of these types of organized force and reaction capacity has its own very definite nature. from which it will depart no hair's breadth for any force in the manifested cosmos. But as there are definite relations of influence and expressions between these four elemental states, it is possible, by using their influence one over the other, to achieve results which, for want of understanding, are called magical. It is, of course, the method of magic to manipulate these tenuous elemental forms, but it is also the method of life to do the same thing. And if magic is to be anything more than autosuggestion, it must use the methods of life, that is to say, it must work through the intermediation of protoplasm, for protoplasm, in its curious web-like structure, carries the subtle magnetic force of the fire of the wise, transmitted through elemental air. So in other words, the operator has to use his own body as a self-starter, for it is the magnetism of his own protoplasm that supplies the basis of manifestation of any force that is being brought through into the sphere of Malkuth. Carried to its logical conclusion, this is the principle of generation, whether of protozoa or spermatozoa. Protozoa or spermatozoa? I think she's hinting to something there. So the modern concept of matter approximates very closely to that which has been held by esoteric science from time immemorial. What our senses perceive are the phenomena attributable to the activities of different types of force, usually in organization and combination. Only through an understanding of the nature of these forces is the nature of matter to be understood. Exoteric science is dealing with the problem by refining its concept of matter till there is no substance left in it. What the physical now knows as matter is very far removed from the obvious. The esotericist approaches the problem from the opposite direction and points out that matter and mind are two sides of the same coin, but that there comes a point in one's investigation when it's profitable to change over terminology and talk of forces and forms in terms of psychology, as if they were conscious and purposive. This, he says, enables us to deal with the phenomena we encounter much better than we can do if we limit ourselves to the terms only applicable to inanimate matter and blind, undirected force. We must always, by the nature of our intellect, use analogy as a help to understanding. If the analogies we use on this level of this investigation are the analogies of inanimate matter, we shall find them so inadequate as to be very limiting and misleading, and darkeners of counsel in general. If, however, we use the terminologies of life and intelligence and purposeful will, duly diluted to the requirements of the very rudimentary state of development of that whim which we have to deal, we shall find we have an analogy which is illuminating instead of limiting, and which will lead to an advancement in understanding. It is for this reason that the esotericist personifies the subtler forces and calls them intelligences. He then proceeds to deal with them as if they were intelligent, and he finds that there is a subtle side of his own nature and consciousness which responds to them, and to which he fondly believes they respond. At any rate, whether the response is mutual or not, his powers of dealing with him are, by this means, greatly extended beyond those which he possesses when he regards them as a fortuitous concourse of uncorrelated incidents. She sure knows how to make everything sound crazy and confusing. We're talking about subtle forces here. And there's a much simpler way to say, well, this is why they call them intelligences in the books. All that stuff just confuses most people, I think. Like if you pick up any book of correspondences, you know, they have angels and all these different things, but they also have names of like the intelligences. It's just kind of like their names of these like etheric operations or whatever. So Malkuth is the nadir of evolution, but it should be looked upon not as the ultimate depth of unspirituality, but as the marking buoy in a yacht race. Any yacht that puts about onto the homeward course before it has rounded the marking buoy is disqualified, and so it is with the soul. If we try to escape from the discipline of matter before we have mastered the lessons of matter, we are not advancing heavenwards, but suffering from arrested development. It is these spiritual defectives who flock from one to another of the innumerable wildcat uplift organizations that come to us from the Far East and the Far West. They find in cheap idealism an escape from their rigorous demands of life. But this is not a way of advancement, but a way of retreat. Sooner or later, they have to face the fence and clear it. Life brings them up to it again and again, and presently he begins to use the whip and spur of psychological sickness for those who will not face life or disassociate from it. And disassociation is the prime cause of the most of the ills that the mind is here to. I think what she's saying right there is pretty damn important, actually. What's up, Abby? What's up, Word Salad? Is that, man, who else said this? Carl Jung? I think it was Carl Jung. He even said, we'll get into any spiritual practice. We'll do anything to not have to face ourselves. So first we'll take up a hobby, then we'll take up a sport, then we'll get into some spiritual practice, or we'll do yoga, we'll do magic, we'll do whatever we have to do so that we really don't have to face ourselves, because it's almost like we're trying to find some kind of shortcut all the time. But the real work is in like really having to do the work and face yourself. It's easy to talk about, right? We're all doing it, though. So if we study the lessons of history, we shall get much light on moral and spiritual problems from an unexpected angle. We see that all civilization and inspiration arose in the East, a point to which those who are of Eastern race or follow an Eastern tradition point proudly, saying that the West must sit at the feet of the East if it is to learn any of the secrets. Now it cannot be denied that there are many things, especially the more recondite aspects of psychology, concerning which the East knows a great deal more than the West, and which we should be wise to learn. But it also cannot be denied that having originated in the East, the growing point of evolution is now to be found in the West, and that for every advance in the art of living on this terrestrial planet, the East must look to the West unless it is content to go back to the spinning wheel standard of life. But let it not be forgotten that with the primitive standard of life goes also the primitive standard of death. A primitive culture can only support a sparse population. A great many people have got to die, mostly the old and the young. When we return to nature, she deals with us after her own manner and her red tooth and claw. The unsoftened impact of nature is not a pleasant thing. When human beings get too thick on the ground, she wipes them out with disease and starvation. With the white man's civilization goes the white man's sanitation. So by refraining from all action, one may achieve release from the bondage of the body more quickly and effectually than one bargains for, if among the actions refrained from are those connected with communal cleanliness and a densely populated land. The Greeks understood the principle of Malkuth better than did anybody else, and they were the founders of the European culture. They taught us to see beauty in perfect proportion and function and nowhere else. The frisee of figures upon the Grecian urn turned the mind of Keats to the contemplation of the ideal truth and beauty. There can be no higher ideal than this for the finite mind to contemplate. For in it the law and the prophets are lifted far above the grim forbiddings of the Mosaic code into the inspirations of an ideal to be pursued. So it is in the sphere of Malkuth that civilization has wrought for the last 1,000 years. It does not notice any astrologer to tell us, that's a typo, I don't know what that word is, it does not something, any astrologer to tell us that the Great War marked the end of an epoch, and that we are now in the dawn of a new phase. According to the Kabbalistic doctrine, the lightning flash, having come down the tree till it ends in Malkuth, is now replaced by the symbolism of the serpent of wisdom, whose coil loops upwards on the paths until its head rests beside Kether. The lightning flash represents the unconscious descent of force, building the planes of manifestation, passing from active to passive and back again in order that equilibrium may be maintained. The serpent coiling up or upwards upon the paths represent the dawn of objective consciousness and is the symbol of initiation by the path whereon the initiates have gone and ahead of their time. Evolution is beginning to go, taking with it the race as a whole. It is now becoming normal for the average man to do what only the initiates used to do. We see the growing point of evolution then beginning to rise out of Malkuth and reach towards Yesod. This means that science, both pure and applied, is passing beyond the study of inanimate in animate matter and is beginning to take account of the etheric and psychic side of things. Shit, really? During World War I and II they were doing that? I don't know. They're still struggling with it now, so. This changing phase is visible all around us for those who can read the signs of the times. We see it in medicine, in international relationships, and industrial organization. Last and most reluctantly, we see it making itself felt in the sciences of physiology and psychology, which cling tenaciously to a materialistic explanation of all things, and especially the life processes, even after physics, which deals with inanimate matter, which has abandoned the materialistic position and talks in terms of mathematics. But the occult division of Malkuth into the four elements gives us a very valuable key. We should regard matter as we know it as Earth of Malkuth. The different types of physical activity, whether in molecules or masses, can be classified under the two headings of anabolism and catabolism. That is to say, the building up and the breaking down processes, or the charging and discharging, right? These can be classified in esoteric terminology as the water or air of Malkuth, and whatever is said by the esoteric philosophy or pagan mythology in relation to these elements will be applicable to these two metabolic processes and functions. The fire of Malkuth is that subtle electromagnetic aspect of matter which is the link within the processes of consciousness and life, and to it all life myths apply. When the principle of the classification is understood, the terminology of the alchemists become less recondite and absurd, for it is seen that the classification into four elements really refers to four modes of manifestation on the physical plane. This method of classification is of very great value, because it enables the relationship and correspondence between the physical plane and the life processes behind it to be readily seen. It is especially important in the study of physiology and pathology, and its practical application. It is a most important key to therapeutics. The more advanced physicians are beginning to feel their way towards this position, and the classifications of Paracelsus are being quoted today by more than one leader of medical thought. The concepts of diathesis or constitutional predisposition is receiving attention. Psychotherapy again is beginning to see that the old classification into the four elements affords a useful guide to treatment, and that it does not do to handle everyone in the same way, nor yet the similar results always spring from similar causes in the realms of the mind, because temperament intervenes and falsifies the results. I don't know what the hell she's talking about. Maybe back then they started talking about this stuff, but nowadays they don't embrace like anything about the four elements that I'm aware of, unless it's like Jungian psychology. For instance, apathy and the phlegmatic type may simply mean boredom, where the same degree of apathy and the sanguine type may mean a complete breakdown of the whole personality. The analogies between the material and mental things can be very misleading, whereas the analogies between mental and material things can be very enlightening. So that's kind of confusing, but if you get into the occult or if you study astrology, and I'd actually do these readings, based on your elemental makeup, you're a certain type of personality. So like, for instance, I'm sanguine. My chart says that I'm sanguine. So if I have a lot of water and fire in my chart, it makes me like this water and fiery, steamy kind of person. So I'm a sanguine person. So I may handle certain things differently than someone who's cold and dry, for instance. So there's like cold and wet, cold and dry, hot and dry, hot and wet, sanguine. That's right, I'm hot and wet. And if you want to know which one you are, I also do those readings too. Okay, so the four elements correspond to the four temperaments as described by Hippocrates, the four tarot suits, the 12 signs of the zodiac, and the 7 planets. If the implications of these statements are worked out, it will be seen that herein are contained some very important keys. The element of earth corresponds to the phlegmatic temperament, the suit of pentacles, the sign of Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn, and the planets Venus and Luna. The element of water corresponds to the bilious temperament, the suit of cups, the signs of Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces, and the planet Mars. The element of air corresponds to the choleric temperament, or the suit of swords, the signs of Libra, Gemini, and Aquarius, and the planets Saturn and Mercury. And the element of fire corresponds to the sanguine temperament, the suit of wands, the sign of Aries, Sagittarius, and Leo, and the planets of the Sun and Jupiter. So, it will be seen that if we classify, I don't know, she just said exactly what I was saying. So it will be seen that if we classify mundane affairs and phenomena in the terms of the four elements, we shall immediately see their relationship to astrology and the tarot. Now, classification is the stage that immediately follows observation in the scientific method. A very great deal of scientific work simply consists in these two processes. In fact, for the rank and file of science, these represent the total range of their activities. If science is limited to these two activities, as it would be if we listen to our more pedestrian scientists, it would be no more than a compiling of lists of natural phenomena, as if the brokers were on the universe. But the imaginative scientist, who alone is worthy of the name of research worker, uses classification not so much as the means of putting things away tidily, but to enable him to recognize relationships. God, there's such an easier way to say that, Dion Fortune. From this imaginative scientist who perceives to the philosophic scientist who interprets is but a step. And from the philosophical scientist who interprets it in terms of causation to the esoteric scientist who interprets in terms of purpose, and so links science to ethics, is but another step. It is the tragedy of the esoteric science that its exponents have nearly always been inadequately equipped upon the plane of Malkuth and consequently unable to coordinate their results with those obtained by workers in other fields. Why do you care? Why do you want magic and philosophy to be accepted by science so damn bad that you have to say all these freaking words just to get it to make sense? Like, let it go. They're not going to accept you. Some of them might, but the whole field of science, probably not. You're talking philosophy here. As long as we rest content with the state of affairs, we shall continue to have muddle-headed thinking and credulous assumptions as our inalienable lot. You can tell Dion unfortunately getting on my nerves a little bit here. I'm sorry. Esoteric science needs to observe the rule of the yacht race and make each magical operation round the marking buoy of Malkuth before it is reckoned to have achieved completion. Let us now interpret this simile from the point of view of technical occultism. Every magical operation is designed to bring power down the planes into the reach of the operator, who then applies it to whatever ends he may design. Many operators are content if they can obtain purely subjective results, that is to say, a sense of exaltation. Others aim at the production of psychic phenomena. It should be recognized, however, that no operation is completed until the process has been expressed in terms of Malkuth, or, in other words, has issued forth an action on the physical plane. If this is not done, the force that has been generated is not properly earthed and is loose. It's a loose force left lying around that causes the trouble in magical experiments. It may not cause trouble in a single experiment, as few operators generate enough power to cause anything, let alone trouble. But in a series of experiments, that effect may be cumulative and result in the general psychic upheaval and run of bad luck and weird happenings so often reported by experimenters. It is these sort of things that give experimental magic a bad name and leads to its being regarded as dangerous compared to a drug addiction. The true analogy, however, would be that with the dangers of the X-ray research in its early days, it is a faulty technique that gives rise to trouble, as it always must when active potencies are being handled. Perfect your technique and you get rid of your troubles and have a very potent force available for use. That's a good analogy. So she relates magical dabbling to people that are messing with an X-ray machine that don't know what they're doing. But if you know what you're doing, it's pretty safe. It's a powerful force. It's a good tool, pretty safe. So the only means of transition from Yesod to Malkuth is through the mediumship of living substances. Now there are various degrees of livingness. The esotericist recognizes life wherever there is organized form, for he says that life alone is the organizer of form, though in what are popularly popularly called inorganic substances, the proportion of life is very small and in some cases infinitesimal. In some forms of inorganic matter, however, there is a by no means negligible proportion of life, just as in plants there is by no means a negligible proportion of intelligence. It is only recent advances in experimental work, notably those of Sir Jagandranath, that have demonstrated this fact, but it has long been known empirically to the practical occultist. He has always made use of crystalline and metallic substances as storage arteries of subtle forces. He has always regarded silk as an insulator. He has, in fact, availed himself of the properties of the same substances that the electrician employs today. The best talismans are considered to be discs of pure metal engraven with suitable devices and kept wrapped in silk of a color appropriate to the force with which the talisman is charged. A precious stone, which is of course a colored crystal, is a very important part of a certain operation because it is held to act as a focus for the force. It is also a very important part of a certain type of wireless receivers, and the influence of colors on mental states is now well recognized. No worker is allowed to work for a lengthy period in the red light rooms of the manufacturers of photographic supplies because it is recognized that such workers are liable to have emotional disturbances and even temporary mental imbalance. And all these things we are rediscovering by means of modern scientific method and its instruments. But they were well known to the ancients back in the day, and their practical applications were worked out to an extent that is not dreamed of today, save among the few who are popularly known as cranky. You're making me cranky. Plants also, we find credited with a varying degree of psychic activity. This is especially attributed to aromatic plants. The ancients had an elaborate system of attribution of plants to the different forms of subtle forces, and some of these, of course, are fantastic, but there are certain broad principles which give guidance. Wherever we find a plant traditionally associated with any deity, we may be fairly certain that the plant has been proven to have affinities with the type of force that the deity represents. It may be that the association appears to our modern eyes to be superficial and irrational. Such association, as Freud has shown us, that the dreaming mind employs, but the worshippers of the deity, if the association is hallowed by tradition, will have built up the psychic connection between the plant and the force. And as in all such traditional associations, once established, the link is easily recoverable by those who know how to make use of the constructive imagination. Or you could have just called it an egregore instead of writing 12 sentences. Whether there is any intrinsic relationship between the nature of the plant and the nature of the force to which it is assigned, as in the case of the rose to Venus and the lily to the Virgin Mary, such a relationship is speedily established by the worshippers of a cult and equally speedily recoverable by those who follow in their footsteps even after a lapse of centuries. Therefore, all practical purposes, there is such a relationship, not only in relation to the plants assigned to a particular deity, but in relation to animals as well. Here's how you say this in layman's terms. You know all those worshipers that worshipped all those plants and stuff over years and years and years and years? Well, because they all believed it, they put their energy into it, and it's still there. That's called an egregore. And even if we leave it alone for a while, we can tap right back into it, and it's still there. Done. They also do that with animals. That would save me a whole damn page if you just say it like that. An attribution which has a special practical importance is that of perfumes and colors. The color attributions have already been given in the tablets at the head of each chapter. Concerning the perfumes, it is less easy to lay down hard and fast rules, as the available perfumes are almost countless, and the forces in practical working often tend to run into the one into the other. For instance, it's difficult and, in fact, undesirable to keep the forces of Netzach separated from those of Tiferet, or those of Hod from Yesod, or Yesod from Malkuth, and anyone who tries working Geburah without Gedula would burn his fingers. So perfumes are used not only to enable the deity to manifest, but to tune the imagination of the operator. To this latter end, they are most effective, as anyone will discover for themselves if they try to work a ceremony without the appropriate perfume. With inexperienced operators, it is advisable to dispense with the use of perfumes in case the psychic effect is too drastic for comfort or convenience. Broadly speaking, we can divide perfumes into those which exalt consciousness and those which stir the subconscious to activity. Of those which exalt the consciousness, the aromatic gums stand by themselves, and these are employed exclusively in the manufacture of ecclesiastical incense. In addition to these, certain essential oils possess similar properties, especially those which are aromatic and astringent rather than sweet and spicy. These substances are of value in all operations in which the aim is increased of intellectual clarity or exaltation of the mystical type. The perfumes that awaken the subconscious mind are of two types, the Dionysiac and the Venusian. The Dionysiac odors are of the aromatic spicy type, such as smoldering cedar or sandalwood or pine cones. The Venusian odors are of a sweet, cloying nature, such as vanilla. In actual practice, these two types of odors shade one into the other, and characteristic flower odors are to be found in both divisions. In the practical work of compounding the perfumes, a blend of ingredients is almost always employed as they enhance each other, and many perfumes, which by themselves are crude and acrid or cloying and sickly, become admirable when blended. So she likes mixing incenses to mix the energy. Done. Just say it. Just fucking say it like that. What's up? Did I say hey to? I did. I said hey to Abby, right? I hope I did. The same applies to precious stones. Rank heresy, though it may be to say so, all one needs is a crystal of the appropriate color, and whether it is a Burmese ruby or a Burma one makes no difference to anything except one's bank balance. The ancients knew this and witnessed this by fact that in the lists of precious stones sacred to various deities, alternative gems are always given. For instance, and Liber 777 gives pearls, moonstones, crystal, and quartz as all being sacred to the moon forces, and the ruby, or any red stone, as sacred to Mars. It is believed by the occultists that the mental concentration of a current of will, backed by the imagination, has an effect upon certain crystals, metals, and oils. He makes a use of this property in order to conserve in them forces of a particular type, so that these forces can be readily reawakened at will, or even exercise their influence, all the time by means of a steady emanation. Most ceremonial depends in some degree, at least, upon the principle of the consecrated magical weapons. It is noteworthy that all the more important equipment of a church is always consecrated before it is taken into use. Whether this consecration is effective is not a matter of opinion. Any good psychic will readily distinguish between consecrated and unconsecrated objects, provided, of course, that the consecration has been effective. It is a matter of experience with any practical occultist that a very definite change takes place in him when he takes his accustomed magical instruments in hand, or puts on his accustomed puts on his accustomed robes. He can do with these what he cannot do without them. He also knows that it takes time to break in a new magical instrument. It is interesting to note in this respect that I am quite unable to write anything about the mystical Kabbalah without my ancient and battered tree of life beside me. It is also interesting to note that when this tree of life, which was originally prepared for me by someone else, became so dingy as to be almost undecipherable, I repainted it myself and found thereafter that it immediately took on a marked increase in magnetism, thus bearing out the old tradition that one should always prepare one's magical weapons as far as possible with one's own hands. The great problem in the practical working is to bring things through to the sphere of Malkuth. Many methods are described by the ancients with how much truth one has no means of knowing. How far were actual materializations obtained by the method of blood sacrifice described by Virgil, and how far did the exalted imagination of the participants in these awe-inspiring rites supply the basis of manifestation? Whatever the facts may be, the holocausts of the ancients are not a practicable method for the modern experimenter to follow. The basis of the idea, however, lies in the fact that freshly shed blood gives off ectoplasm, and there are, of course, materializing mediums who also give off ectoplasm without the shedding of blood. But those who give off an appreciable quantity are few and far between. So when a number of psychically developed people are gathered together in a circle for the purpose of evocation, they may between them give off sufficient ectoplasm to form the necessary basis for physical phenomena. Such a method is not without its difficulties, not to say even risks, and the esotericist, who is a philosopher rather than an experimenter, seldom makes use of it. It is sufficient for him if he gets manifestation in the sphere of Yesod and perceives them with his inner vision. In other words, he doesn't really need it to come down into the earth. He could have a vision of it in his dreams, and that's good enough. The only satisfactory channel of evocation is the operator himself. In the Egyptian method of evocation, known as the assumption of God forms, the operator identifies himself with the God and offers himself as the channel of manifestation. It is his own magnetism that bridges the gulf between Malkuth and Yesod. There is no other method so satisfactory, for the amount of magnetism in a living being is far greater than in any other metal or crystal, however precious. So there you go. You can bring forces down into stones and metals and crystals and anything, right? But it'll never be as potent as bringing something down into the human body. That's pretty scary. The ancient method is also known to us under another name. It is called by the moderns mediumship. So when the spirit speaks through the entranced medium, precisely the same thing is happening as happened in the ancient Egypt when the priest with the mask of Horus spoke with the voice of Horus. When we consider the microcosmic tree, the physical body is Malkuth, the etheric double is Yesod, the astromental body is Hod and Netzach, and the higher mind is Tifreth. Whatever the higher mind can conceive can readily be brought through into manifestation in the subjective Malkuth. We do better to rely upon this method of evocation rather than the extraneous devices of extruded ectoplasm or the outpouring of vital fluids, even if this latter device were practicable in our modern civilization. All right, yeah, so use the tree, right? Try not to do any blood sacrifices, too much unnecessary spillage of the sexual forces. Just use the tree. The best magical weapon is the magician himself, and all other contrivances are but a means to an end, the end being the exaltation of the concentration of consciousness, which makes a magus of an ordinary man. Quote, "Know ye not that ye are the temple of the living God," said a great one. If we know how to use the symbolic furniture of this living temple, we have the keys of heaven in our hands. The key to this use is given in the microcosmic attributions of the tree. Interpreting these in terms of function and function in terms of spiritual principles, we can unlock the door of the storehouse of force. The best and most complete manifestations of the power of God is through the energized enthusiasm of the trained and dedicated man. We would be wiser if we looked for the end result of a magical operation to come about through natural channels rather than to expect an interference with the course of nature or an expectation that in the very nature of things is doomed to disappointment. Let us make this clear by illustration. Stop trying to go against nature. Just tap into it, right? So let us make this clear by illustration. Supposing we desire to heal a sickness, we should, working by the method of the tree, employ a rite or meditation of Tifreth. But are we for this reason to limit our operations to the sphere of Tifreth and require the healing to be a purely spiritual healing, as do the Christian scientists? Or shall we modify our method sufficiently to allow of the laying on of hands and the anointing with oil, which are operations of the sphere of Yesod, designed to conduct magnetic force? Or shall we, which appears to me the wiser method, make use of an operation of Malkuth also, thus bringing the power steadily down the planes into manifestation, without breaking or gaps in the transmutation and conduction? And what is an operation of the sphere of Malkuth? It is simply an action on the physical plane. In an invocation of healing, therefore, I think we do better to invoke the great physician to manifest his power to us through the human physician, for that is the natural channel, than to rely upon a spiritual force for which the only channel of evocation is the spiritual nature of the patient, who may or may not be able to rise to the occasion. So, in other words, what she's saying is it's more natural, if you want to agree or disagree with her, but it's more natural if you're going to try to do a magical working to heal a patient. Say you got someone laying there sick, they're barely conscious or whatever. Well, their body is the conductor, like, of this healing. So are you going to try to, like, anoint her with oil, use magical weapons, do a prayer, whatever? Or can you bring down what's already naturally occurring, which is to put the energy into the doctor? So put more divine energy into the doctor to heal the patient. That's what she's saying. It sounds like complete horseshit. Yes, I hate to say that about some of Dion Fortune stuff, but some of it is like she's like talks so much about this magic stuff, but then when it comes to actually doing things, she's a little scared, you know. And if she's seen some of the doctors nowadays, there's some really good doctors out there, but some of them you can't trust. The great spiritual force can be brought to bear effectually upon the healing of our diseases is beyond question, but they must have a channel of manifestation. And why be a great pains to build a psychic one when there is a natural one ready to hand? God moves in mysterious ways, and his wonders to perform a natural law is a sealed book to us. But when we understand the ways of nature's workings, we see that God moves in a perfectly natural way through the regularly established channels. The difference between the supernatural and the natural does not lie in the channels of manifestation that are used, but in the amount of power that comes through them. Not in quality, but in quantity does the flow of power alter when spiritual forces are successfully invoked. The whole problem of Malkuth is a problem of channels and connecting links. The rest of the work is done by the mind on the subtler planes. The real difficulty lies in the transition from the subtle to the dense, for the subtle is so ill-equipped to work on the dense. And this transition is effected by the means of magnetism of living things, whether organic or inorganic. 3 ideas issue from a contemplation of the Yetziratic text related to Malkuth. The concept of the resplendent intelligence, which illuminates the splendor of all the lights, and the relationship between Malkuth and Bina, and the function of Malkuth in causing an influence to emanate from the angel of Kether. How many more damn pages do we got to get? We don't have that much further to go. I might as well finish it. Some of you guys will probably sleep already. Domek. It may seem a curious idea that Malkuth, which is the material world, should be the illuminator of the lights. And we can understand this, however, if we refer to the analogy of physics, which tells us that the sky only appears blue and luminous owing to the reflection of light from the innumerable dust particles floating in the atmosphere. Absolutely dustless air is illuminated, and our sky would have the darkest of interstellar spaces if it were not for these dust particles. We also learn from the study of physics that we see objects solely by means of the rays of light that reflect from their surfaces. When there is little or no reflection, as with black cloth, it is almost invisible in a dim light, a properly made much use of by conjurers and illusionists. It is the formative concreting function of Malkuth which finally renders tangible and definite what was upon the higher planes intangible and indefinite, and this is its great service to manifestation and its characteristic power. All the lights, that is to say, the emanations of all the other Sephiroth, become illuminated, visible, when reflected from the concrete aspects of Malkuth. Every magical operation must come through to Malkuth before it can be reckoned to have attained completion, for only in Malkuth is the force finally locked home into form, and therefore all magical work is better carried out in the form of a ritual performed on the physical plane, even if the operator is working alone, than simply as a form of meditation operating upon the astral plane. Only there must be something upon the physical plane, even if it be no more than lines drawn on a talisman or the writing of signs upon the air, which brings the action through to the plane of Malkuth. Experience proves that an operation so terminated is a very different matter to an operation which begins and ends on the astral. I've got to run to the restroom. We're going to finish this book tonight, but I got to go to the bathroom. I'm wiggling in my chair like a little kid. I feel like I'm about to pee my pants. This isn't a break. Quick restroom break. That's all it is. Got to do it, man. Got to do it.
Nothing cooler than listening to Typo Negative sing a song about werewolves. When I was younger, I used to get hammered and ride around and listen to this stuff, man. Every single Typo Negative. I was rebellious. Like, I would ride in front of churches and just blast it. I don't know why. That's stupid. Okay. This is, I'm telling you, this is why people don't want to do, once you get into like ceremonial magic and high like magic and stuff like that, or whatever you want to call it. I don't like calling it high magic, but it's just daunting, isn't it? Like learning all the aspects of the self and the tree and how things come into manifestation, all about the pillars and the worlds and all this stuff. It's daunting. But once you start to understand it, it becomes interesting. And two, like, I don't want to get to this place where people are asking me a bunch of questions and I could be like, hey, I got a whole series of like an audio book down there. Yeah, lycanthropy, that's right. You get it, bro. I got a whole series of books you could listen to if you don't want to read it. Valicia, what's up? She says, I feel like I accessed this without meaning to. I had the imbalance experience. Could that be brought on by another whom has the wisdom and experience and vibration and music and natural evolution? Yeah, I mean, if you're unbalanced and someone comes on, let's say you're vibrating unnaturally against something, and something that has a natural balance or vibration comes into your sphere, it could cause some disruption for sure. But that's kind of what we're doing. Like when you cast a circle, and let's just look at this from not the scary side of things, but the childlike imaginative side of things, using the imagination, playing with that unconscious spark, right? So when you cast a circle, you're really setting your ego apart from the movie screen, but it also kind of brings the shit closer to you. I don't think people realize that. That's why they say in a lot of magic books, when you start doing the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram and all these things, like, it does protect you in a sense, but it also lights up all the stuff in the astral realm and brings it to you. So basically I'm saying that to say this. We always have some kind of imbalanced force that's going against natural forces, because our authentic childlike self is always butting heads against the exterior world or the movie screen or the outside of the circle. It's a constant play trying to figure itself out. What we want to try to do is, like you're saying in that comment, is to get into natural evolution to where we can, what Liam Christopher talks about is we have to understand the difference between joy and pleasure. A lot of times we'll just relieve our suffering, like getting an air conditioner, and thinking that's pleasure and joy. And it is, in a sense, relatively. But really what you did was just relieve a little bit of suffering. Pleasure is totally different than, relieving suffering. And most of our lives, while we're trying to work this stuff out, that's all we're doing is suffering and relieving the suffering until we get to a place to where we can get things more abundant and get in line with nature, So this is going to get even more confusing, because she's going to start talking about the relationship between Malkuth, which is this sphere down at the very bottom, and the sphere of Bina, which is the mother sphere at the very top left. So here we go. I got to finish this book. I'm not doing another video on this book. I don't know how long this is going to take me, but we're getting to the end of it. So the relationship between Malkuth and Bina is very clearly indicated in the titles assigned to both of these Sephra. Bina is the superior mother, and Malkuth the inferior mother. As we have already seen, Bina is the primordial giver of form, and Malkuth being the sphere of form. The relationship is obvious. That which had its inception in Bina has its culmination in Malkuth.
This point gives us an important clue by means of which to guide our researches among the ramifications of the polytheistic pantheons. The Kabbalistic system is explicit concerning the doctrines of emanations, whereby the one unfolds into the many and the many are reabsorbed into the one. No other system is specific upon this point, though in all of them it is hinted under the guise of genealogies. Yeah, that makes sense. So the begettings and the matings of the gods and goddesses, by no means always in holy wedlock, give definite indication of the implicit doctrines of emanation and polarity, and are not merely ribald fantasies of primitive man creating the gods in his own image and likeness. A careful comparison of the information that has come down to us concerning the rites by which the ancients worshipped their many gods soon reveals that clear-cut myths so delightfully retold for children have little bearing on the actual religion of the folk who use them as the means of expression for spiritual teachings. The gods and goddesses melt one into the other in the most perplexing fashion, so that we get the bearded Venus and Hercules of all persons arrayed in female clothes, which looks kind of weird, right? It is clearly from a study of the ancient art that the persons and characteristics of the various gods and goddesses were used as a form of picture writing to indicate definite abstract ideas of which the convention was well understood by the priesthood. Having to deal with an illiterate population for the most part, for learning was limited to a very few in those days, they wisely said, "Look on this symbol and think about this story. You may not know what it means, but if you're looking in the right direction and the direction whence light arises, and in proportion as you are able to receive it, light will flow into your soul if you contemplate these ideas." And it is probable to the point of certainty that the illumination given in the mysteries included the elucidation of the metaphysics of these myths. They did the same thing with Renaissance art, alchemical art, tarot cards, all that stuff. It's like all these complex but simple esoteric ideas based upon the tree of life, astrology, the elements, alchemy, and all this stuff. Put it into one picture, and instead of writing a whole damn book about it, they're like, just stare at this symbol, meditate upon it until your unconscious starts unlocking all the meanings of it. So a long time ago, they had to use gods and goddesses, so to speak, to kind of tell these stories, right? In a sense. Persephone, Diana, Aphrodite, Hera, all exchanged their symbols, functions, and characteristics, and even subordinate titles in a bewildering manner in Greek myths and art. Likewise do Priapus, Pan, Apollo, and Zeus. The best we can say of them is that all the goddesses are great mothers and all the gods are givers of life, the difference between them lying not in function, but in the level upon which they function. A distinction is drawn between the celestial Venus and the goddess of earthly love of the same name. The discerning can see an equal distinction and an equal underlying identity between Zeus, the All-Father, and Priapus, equally addicted to fatherhood, but after another manner, the one being earthly, where the other is celestial. Nevertheless, they are not two gods, but one God, just as Bina and Malkuth are not two distinct types of force, but the same force functioning on different planes or levels. This is the key to the understanding of the significance of phallic worship, which plays so important a part in all ancient and primitive faiths, a part so little understood by their scholastic interpreters. Its real meaning is the bringing down of the Godhead into manhood, and the hope of taking manhood back up into Godhead, a process which is also the basis of the Freudian therapy. The statement that Malkuth causes an influence to emanate from the angel of Kether further bears out this idea. We see the Great Mother, which is Malkuth, polarizes with the All-Father, which is Kether. This classification, however, is too simple to serve us adequately, whether we are reducing a pagan pantheon to its simplest terms or dealing with the chances and changes of personal life. But in the four quarters or elements into which Malkuth is divided, we find the keys that we need. The four elements are said to be the earth, air, fire, and water of the wise, and that is to say, the four types of activity. They are represented in the notation of esoteric science by four different types of triangles. Fire is represented by a triangle pointed upwards, air by a similar triangle with a bar across it. thus indicating the air may be esteemed as akin in nature to fire, but denser. In fact, we should not go far wrong if we called air negative fire, or fire positive air. Water is represented by a triangle pointed downwards, and earth by the same triangle with a bar across it. And to these two symbols, the same principles apply to their predecessors. So supposing then we consider the fire triangle as representing unconditional force, and the air triangle as representing conditional force, the earth triangle as representing totally inert form, and water triangle as representing an active type of form, we have another mode of classification available. And in most ancient myths, the air or space god is the parent of the sun or celestial fire, and water is the matrix of the earth. This comes out clearly on the central pillar of the tree of life, where Kether, space, overshadows Tiferet, the sun center, and the watery Yesod, the moon center, overshadows the earth and Malkuth. Or supposing we arrange the symbols composing the glyph after another manner, which is the glory of the tree that it enables us to do so, and place them as the four elements, citron, olive, russet, and black in the sphere of Malkuth, and consider the life force descending from Kether as operating after the manner of an alternating current of electricity, which the doctrine of alternating polarity teaches us to do, we find that force will sometimes be flowing from Malkuth to Kether, and sometimes from Kether to Malkuth. Now this is an all-important point when applied to the microcosm, for it teaches us that we need to be in circuit with the earth soul just as much as with the God of heaven. And there is an inspiration that rises up from the unconscious quite as much as there is an inspiration that flows down from the superconscious. Yeah, so I told you, it's a constant back and forth, right? So this comes out clearly in the Greek myths, wherein we find such positive earth forces as Pan, who by virtue of his goat symbolism cannot be assigned otherwise than to the sphere of earth, or Capricorn is the most earthly of earth's triplicities. Pan represents the positive magnetism of the earth, uprushing in its return to the All-Father. Ceres, on the other hand, or many-breasted Diana, who are both very earthly Venuses and far from Virgin, represent the final earthing of the heavenly force in dense matter. So Hera, who has been called the celestial Venus or heavenly Aphrodite, represents the return of the uprushing earth force to the heaven and its earth positives on a celestial level. So these are kind of difficult to see, but what she's saying is some of the gods, you may have 3 or 4 different goddesses in the spheres, in the feminine spheres on the tree, like in Bina or Malkuth or whatever. But if you really pay attention to their stories and what they represent and their symbolism and stuff, a lot of times one of them could represent a more heavenly goddess that's bringing energy down to earth. Another one can represent a more earthly goddess that's uprushing energy back to heaven. Maybe there's a goddess that represents both forces in the middle. You just kind of got to look at it and study it more. It can get complex, actually, but it doesn't have to be, because everything, it's like bartending. I hate to even relate it to this, but if you look at a bar, because I managed a bar for 4 years, right? So if you don't know anything about a bar and you walk into the place, you got kegs and drinks everywhere and all these different types of glasses and garnishes and stuff, and you don't know what's what. But once you start learning what types of drinks and glasses go what, and this ice goes here with this glass and all this stuff, it's like there's several different systems in the bar. Just like this tree has several different systems inside of it. Planets, geometry, god systems, emanations, flaming swords, triangles, 4 worlds, all this different stuff. All these different systems reside in this one glyph, right? Which makes it complex. But once you start learning each system for what it is, then you can kind of look back, I guess, better and look at it better, and you can see all these different systems inside the tree, you know. It's probably a bad analogy, but it's the only thing I can think of right now. You know, some people are really good at it, though, man. Like Dion Fortune or other occultists could look at a tree and they could look at all the 10 different spheres, and they could say, they could just start putting gods in each sphere. They know where the geometrical figures land in each sphere, every planet, which sphere, gemstones, metals, all that stuff. They know which sphere it belongs to. They know which world it's in. They know which one of the triangles that it's in, or on what pillar that it belongs to, and what all those separate things that I just said represent. These are things difficult to elucidate to those who have not seen the sun at midnight. They yield much to meditation, but little to dispute. So in the sphere of Malkuth are worked all divinations. Now the object of any method of divination is to find a set of things on the physical plane which correspond accurately and comprehensively to the invisible forces, in the same way that movements of the hands of a clock correspond to the passage of time. For revealing general trends and conditions, it is agreed by universal experiences of those who have studied such matters that astrology is the best system of correspondences. But for obtaining an answer to a single question, it is not sufficiently specific, for too many factors may come in to modify the result. The initiated diviner, therefore, makes use of a more specific system, such as tarot or geomancy, when he wants to obtain an answer to a specific question. But it is of little use to go into a shop and buy a pack of tarot cards unless there is a knowledge necessary to build up the astral correspondences to each card. This takes time, as there are 72 cards to work with, and once it is done, however, the operator can take the cards into his hands with a considerable degree of confidence that his subconscious mind, whatever that may be, will all unwittingly deal the cards that refer to the matter in question. Exactly how the shuffle and deal is effected we do not know, but one thing is certain: when the great angel of the tarot who has been contacted, the cards are remarkably revealing. How many people do you see praying to Haru, which is the angel of the tarot according to the Golden Dawn? You're supposed to actually say a prayer to that angel before each reading. Having considered the general principles of the sphere of Malkuth, we are now in a position to study its special symbolism with profit. It is called the kingdom, in other words. That is what Malkuth means. The sphere ruled by the king, and the king is the title of the microprosopos, who consists of the 6 central sephiroth, excluding the 3 supernals, excluding the top 3. We may regard Malkuth, or the material sphere, as the sphere of manifestation of these 6 central sephiroth, which themselves are emanated by the 3 supernals. Everything ends in Malkuth, even as everything begins in Kether. The magical image of Malkuth is a young woman, crowned and veiled, and this is the Isis of nature, her face veiled to show that the spiritual forces are hidden within the outer form. This idea is also present in the symbolism of Bina, which is summed up in the concept of the outer robe of concealment, and Malkuth is clearly set forth in the Yetziratic text, which is Bina upon a lower arc. So Bina is called the sterile mother. Let me bring down this damn glyph. You guys can see Bina at the top left there. Damn it. I had a better tree, man. A PNG that was clear. You could see through it, fit in that moon perfect. I can't find the damn thing. Miss anybody? Any questions in the chat? No. Lots of statements. Cool statements. Okay. Bina is called the dark, sterile mother, and Malkuth is called the bride of the microprosopos, or the bright, fertile mother. And these correspond to the dual aspects of the Egyptian moon goddess as Isis and Hathor. Isis being the positive aspect of the goddess, and Hathor the negative aspect. In Greek symbolism, these would correspond to Aphrodite and Ceres. Now, Aphrodite is the positive aspect of female potency, for it is remembered that under the law of the alternating polarity, that which is negative on the outer planes is positive on the inner, and vice versa. Aphrodite, the celestial Venus, is the giver of magnetic stimulus to the spiritually negative male. It is because her function is not understood in modern life that so much is wrong with modern life. Think about what you just said there. That shit's still going on. Bina, the higher aspect of Isis, is however barren because the positive pole is always the giver of the stimulus, but never the producer of the result. So the Malkuth aspect of Isis is the Bina fertile mother, the goddess of fecundity, thus indicating the end result of the operation of Isis on the physical plane. The situation of Malkuth at the foot of the pillar of equilibrium places it in the direct line of the descent of power from Kether, transmuted in Doth, the invisible Sephirah, passing on the two planes of form via Tifereth, and this is the path of consciousness where the two side pillars are paths of function. Remember, the middle pillar is consciousness, the other two pillars are function. But the two side pillars also converge on Malkuth via the 31st and 29th path. Consequently, everything ends in Malkuth. So everything is balanced here. Even all the pillars, Sephirah, everything. We who are incarnated in physical bodies are standing in Malkuth. And when we set out upon the way of initiation, our route lies up the 32nd path to Yesod. This path, straight up the central pillar, is called the path of the arrow, which is shot from Kesheth, the bow of promise. It is by this route that the mystic rises upon the plains, and the initiate, however, adds to his experience the powers of the side pillars, as well as the realization of the middle pillar. So this is kind of why, like, when you go into a temple, or a Golden Dawn temple or whatever, you'll put two pillars, like, in the temple. Like, I have some, too. You kind of can see the play of the forces there. It just rained and stopped raining, and all of a sudden it just got clogged up big time. So this aspect of the central pillar is expressed in the Yetzeretic text, wherein it states that Malkuth causes an influence to emanate from the Prince of Countenances, the Angel of Kether. The additional titles assigned to Malkuth bring out its attributes clearly. It is regarded as the gate and the mate. These two ideas are in essence one idea, for the womb of the mother is the gate of life. It is also called the gate of death, for the birth into the plane of form is the death to higher things. Malkuth is also said to be called Kala, the bride of the microprosopos, and Malka, the queen of the male, or the Malik, the king. This clearly indicates the function in polarity that prevails between the planes of form and the planes of force. The planes of form being the female aspect, polarized and made fertile by the influences of the planes of force, the male aspect. The god name in Malkuth is Adonai Melech, or Adonai Ha-Aretz, which titles means the Lord who is king and the Lord of earth. And herein we clearly see the assertion of the supremacy of the one God in the kingdoms of earth. And every magical operation wherein the operator takes power into his own hands should commence with the invocation of Adonai to indwell his temple of earth and rule therein, and that no force may break from its allegiance to the one. Those who call upon the name of Adonai call upon God made manifest in nature, which is the aspect of God adored by initiates of the nature mysteries, whether Dionysian or Isaac, which concern the different ways of opening superconsciousness via the subconscious. The archangel is the great angel Sandalphon, who is sometimes called by the Kabbalists the dark angel, whereas Metatron, the angel of countenance, is the bright angel. And these two angels are held to stand behind the right and the left shoulders of the soul in its hour of crisis. They might be taken to represent good and bad karma. It is in reference to the function of Sandalphon as the dark angel presiding over the karmic debt that Malkuth is called the gate of justice and the gate of tears. It has been said by a wit, with more truth than he knew, that this planet was actually some other planet's hell. It is in this planet, Malkuth, this planet Earth, was some other planet's hell. It is in very fact the sphere in which karma is normally worked out. Where there is sufficient knowledge, however, karma can be worked out deliberately on subtler planes, and this method is one of the forms of spiritual healing. The orders of angels assigned to Malkuth are the Ashim, or the souls of fire, or fiery particles, of which Madame Blavatsky says some very interesting things. A soul of fire is in actual fact the consciousness of an atom. The Ashim, therefore, represents the natural consciousness of dense matter.
It is these which bestow on it its characteristics. It is these fiery lives, these infinitesimal electrical charges which are forever weaving backwards and forwards with tremendous activity in the background of matter and form its basis. Everything that we know as matter builds up on this groundwork. It is with the help of these fiery lives that certain types of magic are worked. There are but few who can work such magic. For the denser the plane to be manipulated, the greater must the power of the magus who commands it. The mundane chakra of the Malkuth is the sphere of the elements. These we have already considered in such detail as is possible in the pages. If you really want to study the elements too, you should read Eliphas Levi, Henry Cornelius Agrippa, and the Kabbalistic Tarot. I think you should read that too. The spiritual experience of Malkuth is the vision of the holy guardian angel. Now this angel, which according to the Kabbalists is assigned to each soul at birth and companions him until death, when it takes him into its keeping and presents him before the face of God for judgment, is in actuality the higher self of each one of us, which builds up around the divine spark that is the nucleus of the soul and endures for an evolution, sending down a process into matter at each incarnation to form the basis of the new personality. When the higher self and the lower self become united through the complete absorption of the lower by the higher, true adepthood is gained, and this is the great initiation, the lesser divine union. It is the supreme experience of the incarnate soul when it takes this place. It is freed from any compulsion to rebirth into the prison house of flesh. Thenceforth it is free to go up and down on the planes and enter into its rest, or, if it so elects, to remain within the earth sphere and function as a master. This, then, is the spiritual experience which is assigned to Malkuth, the bringing down of the Godhead into manhood, just as the spiritual experience of Tiferet is the taking up of manhood into the Godhead. The especial virtue of Malkuth is said to be discrimination, and this idea is further carried out in the curious symbolism of the ancients, which declared the correspondence in the microcosm to be with the anus. Whatever in life, its effect has to be excreted. Everything has to be excreted in life. And the macrocosmic excretion is into the clipotic spheres, which depends or suspends below Malkuth, whence the cosmic excreta cannot return to the planes of organized form until they find balance and equilibrium. There is, therefore, in the clipotic world a sphere which is not hell, but purgatory. It is a reservoir of disorganized force emanated from broken up forms cast out from evolution. It is chaos upon a lower arc. It is from this reservoir of force that it is accustomed to form and therefore organizes readily that the shells or imperfect entities build up their vehicles. It is also said to be drawn up for the lower types of magic of an evil kind. The tendency of such forces are available in the clipotic sphere must always be to assume once more such forms as they were accustomed to before they were disintegrated and reduced to their primal state, as these forms were at least out of date, if not actually actively evil. It naturally follows that this matter of chaos is not a desirable substance to work in, and had best be left there until its purification is complete and has filtered back through the sphere of earth by the natural channels, and also been drawn once again into the stream of evolution. It is for this reason that all the underworld cults and the evocation of the departed are undesirable. Even though it sounds cool and dark, it's still undesirable. For the forms the manifesting entities assume must be built in part at least of the substance of chaos. It is the especial virtue of Malkuth, then, to act as a kind of cosmic filter, casting out the effect and preserving that which still retains its usefulness. The characteristic vices of the functioning of Malkuth are said to be avarice and inertia. It is easy to see how the stability of Malkuth can be overdone and so give rise to sluggishness and inertia. Yeah, go live on the beach for a little while. You'll get avarice and inertia. You'll stop doing everything. The concept of avarice, though not so obvious upon the surface, soon yields its significance to investigation, for the over-retentiveness of avarice is a kind of spiritual costiveness, the exact opposite of the discrimination which rejects the excreta of life through the cosmic anus into the cosmic cesspool of the clipoth. It is interesting to note that Freud declares that miser is invariably constipated and associates the dream of money with feces. Did Freud say that for real? So, like, if you're dreaming about money, it's basically the same thing as poo? I did not know that. I don't read much Freud, though. One of the most important things we have to do before we can rise out of the limitations of life in Malkuth and breathe a wider air is to learn how to let go, how to sacrifice the lesser to the greater, and so buy the pearl of great price. It is discrimination which enables us to know which is the lesser value that has to be given up in order to obtain the greater. For there is no gain without sacrifice. What we do not realize is that every sacrifice should yield a substantial profit and treasure laid up in heaven, where neither moth nor rust corrupt it. Otherwise, it's merely a useful waste. We have already noted one of the correspondences assigned to Malkuth in the microcosm. It is also said, however, that Malkuth corresponds to the feet of the divine man. Here again we have an important concept, for unless the feet are firmly planted on Mother Earth, no stability is possible. There are altogether too many top-heavy mystics who like to think that the divine man ends at the neck like a cherub, and gives no place to the generative organs of Yesod or the anus of Malkuth. They need to learn the lesson that the heavenly dream taught to St. Peter, that nothing which God made is unclean unless we allow it to become so. We should recognize the divine life in all of its functions, and so bring the manhood up into Godhead and sanctify it. Cleanliness is next to godliness, especially internal cleanliness. If we evade and avoid a thing, how are we to keep it clean and wholesome? The taboos of a primitive people have been altogether overdone in our civilized life, with disastrous consequences to the health and the wholesomeness of humanity. The symbols of Malkuth are the altar of the double cube and the equal arm cross, or the cross of the elements. The altar of the double cube is symbolic of the Hermetic maxim, as above, so below, and teaches that which is visible is the reflection of that which is invisible, and corresponds with it exactly. This cubical altar is the altar of the mysteries, in contradistinction to the table altar, which is the altar of the church. For the table altar stands in the east, but the cubical altar stands in the center. It is said to be in proper proportion when it is the height of the navel of a 6-foot man, and its breadth and depth are half its height. The equal arm cross, or cross of the elements, represent the 4 elements in balanced equilibrium, which is perfected in Malkuth. It is represented on the tree by the division of Malkuth into 4 quarters: colored citron, olive, russet, and black, with the citron towards Yesod, and the black towards the Clipoth, the olive towards Netzach, and the russet towards Hod. These are the reflections of the 3 pillars and the cliphotic sphere, dulled and tempered by the veil of the earth. So now you know why there's 4 little weird colors in Malkuth. Thus are all things summed up in Malkuth, though seen in a glass darkly by the reflection and not face to face. The 4 tarot cards yield curious results when subjected to meditation in the light of what we know about Malkuth. The 10 of Wands is called the Lord of Oppression. The 10 of Cups, the Lord of perfected success. The 10 of Swords, the Lord of ruin. And the 10 of Pentacles, the Lord of wealth. As we have already seen, it is in Malkuth that spiritual forces come to their fulfillment on the plane of form, and by taking these completed forms and sacrificing them, we can translate them back into spiritual potencies. These 4 tarot cards, it will be observed, are alternately good and bad in their significance. In fact, the 10 of Swords is said to be the worst card in the pack to divination. There is a curious alchemical doctrine which has a bearing on this point. It is taught that the signs of the planets are compounded out of 3 symbols: the solar disk, the lunar crescent, and the cross of the corrosion of sacrifice, and these symbols, rightly interpreted, give the key to the alchemical nature of the planet and its practical use in the great work of transmutation. You guys remember that Jeff Harmon's been on the show, if you want to go back and listen to him talk about that, the astrologer, that all of the planetary sigils have a disc, a cross, and a crescent. And where that disc, cross, and crescent are in that symbol relates to the nature of the behavior of that energy, right? So, for instance, Mars, in whose symbol the cross surmounts the circle, is said to be outwardly corrosive but inwardly solar.
Venus, in which the circle surmounts the cross, is said to be outwardly solar but inwardly corrosive, or in other words of Scripture, sweet in the mouth but bitter in the belly. So in these 4 tens, or the tarot of the tens, the same principle is seen to prevail. Each card represents the working of a certain type of spiritual force on the plane of dense matter. The most spiritual of these cards, the 10 of the suit, whose ace is said to be the root of the powers of fire, is called the Lord of Oppression. And this reaches us that the higher spiritual forces are apt to be outwardly corrosive when operating upon the plane of matter. The powers of fire, at their highest potency in the 10 of Wands, are a refining fire. As gold is tried in the furnace, so the heart must be tried by pain. Now, on the other hand, all symbolism of the suit of cups or chalices shows the Venusian influence very clearly. It is in this suit we find the lords of pleasure and material happiness and abundance. But we also find the lords of illusory success, abandoned success, and loss in pleasure, which shows clearly that this suit, though outwardly solar, is inwardly corrosive. Swords, again, are under the Martian influence, and the Lord of Ruin shows the total sacrifice of all material things. But in Pentacles, Earth of Earth, the position is again reversed, and we find that the 10 of Pentacles is the Lord of Wealth. So it will be seen, therefore, that those cards, which are of suits primarily spiritual in nature, are outwardly corrosive on the physical plane, and those cards of the suits that are primarily material in nature are outwardly solar or beneficent on the material plane. This teaches a very useful lesson and gives a very important key when used in these systems of divination, which are designed to give discernment of the spiritual influences operating in a case. All mundane affairs rise and fall like the waves of the sea, crest following through and through following crest in rhythmical progression. Therefore, when any mundane condition is either its zenith or nadir, we know that a change of tide is to be expected in the near future. This knowledge is embodied in many popular sayings such as, "It's a long lane that has no turning," and "the darkest hour is before the dawn." Harriman, the great American millionaire, said that he made his fortune by always buying on a falling market and selling on a rising one, which is the exact opposite to what everyone else is doing. Nevertheless, it is a far-sighted proceeding, for a boom always topples over into a depression, and a depression issues forth into a boom. This has happened so often, even with living memory, that one would have thought speculators would have learnt the lesson of history, but they never do. It was a knowledge of this fact that enabled the fraternity of the inner light to be piloted steadily amidst the post-war difficulties and came through without having no curdle of any of its activities. Curtail. She's bragging about her order after the war. There are times when it is necessary to be modest in order to be solvent, but there are times when one can launch out boldly despite all outwardly seemingly, because one knows that the tide is rising under one. So these 4 cards then give a very true insight into the nature of the operation of the forces in Malkuth. And when they turn up in a divination, one always prepares for the outward gold to turn to corrosion, and the outward corrosion to turn to gold sooner or later. And one takes in or spreads one's sails accordingly. This is the true use of divination, to enable one to discern the spiritual forces concerning in any happening and act accordingly. Of what use, then, is the divination performed by the one who has not spiritual discernment? And can one expect to find spiritual discernment in the hack occultist who gives so much for half a crown and so much for 10 shillings? Spiritual things are not done in this way. Among the ancients, divination was a religious rite, and so it should be among us, if it is not to bring a trail of bad luck in its wake. And then she's got a whole bunch of stuff on the clip-off, which I'm not going to read because I'm exhausted. I'll read it later, I guess, and put it in a video. I can't do it, man. That was the longest one, man. That was like, I thought Minor was the longest chapter in this book, but that was the longest one. For sure. So there's only a few, like, how many pages left are in this thing? Too many to read tonight. I'm doing that slow blink thing, man.
The clip-off. People are more fascinated by the clip-off than they are the tree because that's the bad side, you know. Like we never got out of that it's cool to be dark phase. Let's see. I say embrace your dark side, but it's... Okay, so it's... How many pages is it? I might read it. No. Because she goes into like dark magic here, which is kind of interesting. Nah, I'll do it tomorrow because it's short, and then we can talk about like black magic and stuff or something in a show. All right, so we're done with the tree. I mean, we're done with the base of the tree. We still got to talk about the clip off tomorrow, and then we'll get guests and stuff back on. Listen, if you guys want a reading, I'm doing them for 70% off. I do the Golden Dawn spread readings. I'm doing them a little different now, so if you donate, it doesn't matter how you buy it. If you get it through the shop, whatever, however you get it, we're trying to raise money here. So however you do it, I'm going to send you a link, and when you click on that link, it's called Calendly, and it'll show you all the dates and times that you can pick, and you just pick one, and then you'll get it like a full hour reading with me. It's only $30. It's super reasonable, and it helps out the cause of the show, the station, all the stuff that we're trying to recoup here after the disaster of whatever happened. And thanks for coming out tonight, for all of those that you came out live on YouTube as well as on the radio station. I see you guys blinking on the map too on the station. Love you. This was a long one, but I kind of wanted to, I don't know, man. I wanted to finish just at least the tree. Tomorrow we'll talk about the clip off and a little bit of the dark side of the tree. Know you'll be interested in that. Good night, y'all. Sweet dreams.
Broadcast. You're listening to Lighting the Void Radio.